Chapter 1. The Boy That Spun the Water. His blue eyes stared as the water turned faster and faster in the small lake. He moved his hand above it, making it go faster and faster as he watched the water twist and turn. He smiled before stopping, and the water stopped moving. His eyes were full of wonder, excitement, and questioning. He got up and ran to the Hokage's office to show the old man what he could do. The 6-year-old boy ran into town and ran by the people that glared him. The boy completely ignored them, too excited about what he could do to even care. He ran to the tower and ran up to the office. When he reached the door, he opened it yelling out, "Hey, old man, you have to come see this." The third Hokage stopped reading the papers he was looking at and saw the smiling, excited blonde. He gave a soft smile and said, "See what Naruto." Naruto's eyes brightened much as he spoke. "The water. It moves around and around like a whirlpool at the lake." The Hokage looked at Naruto for a moment and asked, "What do you mean?" Naruto then said, "I was kicking in the water and then I decided to put my hand in, but then all of a sudden it started to move around and around and around. So I decided to move my hand around too, and the little swirling water started to get bigger and it moved faster and faster. And when I stopped, it stopped too." The Hokage eyes widened a little, but then said in a calm voice, "Really? Naruto, come here." Naruto titled his head but nodded. When he walked close to the Hokage, he saw the Hokage look into his eyes. When he did, the Hokage eyes grew wide and he was stunned. Naruto, wondering what was going on, had asked, "What's the matter, old man?" The third then said as he pointed to a mirror in the far side of the room, "Naruto, go look in the mirror over there and tell me what you see." Naruto nodded and did as he was told. He stood in front of the mirror and was about to say nothing was different until he stared at his eyes. His eyes widened as he saw them. In the mirror he saw himself, but not just that. His blue eyes were swirling around and around like the whirlpools itself. Naruto took a step away and asked out, Why are my eyes doing that?" The Hokage then spoke, "Naruto, your bloodline has been awakened." Naruto quickly looked back to the Hokage and said with his eyes widened, "Bloodline? I have a bloodline? Bloodline, I have a bloodline?" Naruto woke up and saw a ceiling in front of him. He closed his eyes and muttered, "I haven't had that dream in years." As he slowly got up, he noticed the room was dark, which meant his team was asleep. He smirked to himself and stood up before heading to the door to go outside. As he opened the door, he felt the moonlight hit him. He smelt the cold air as it rushed at him. He took few steps forward and said to himself, "This place would be perfect for my kind." He then saw that if he took one more step, he would fall into the water. He smiled and put one foot on the water, not sinking at all. He moved forward and kept walking until he was not too far from Tezuna's house. He put his hands in front of him and moved them around and around. 2 small whirlpools soon started to form under his hands as the water of the lake started to spin. He smiled like he did when he was child. He was the boy that spun the water. But he didn't notice the wide-eyed woman standing near the railings of her house. She watched as the water spun around more and more as the young blonde boy moved his hands. Here is Chapter 2. I do not own Naruto. Clan name, Uzumaki. How many are left? Unknown. Last known clan member, Naruto. Bloodline name, Busher Gogyu, spinning water. What bloodline does? The user can control the water's currents and turn it into a whirlpool. But that is not what all it does. It can also turn the water into any shape they wish. They can even freeze the water. They can control anything that is or was water. They can even control the human body since it is about 60% of water, but they need to concentrate hard to do this. By the age of 11, they can walk on water without chakra. They can also bring plants or trees to life with the water they have. But at the same time, they can overflow them and kill them. To them, water is rebirth and healing, and at the same time death and pain. They can even heal themselves and others in great speed, almost like magic. How to know if it's a Uzumaki? Their eyes are their weakness when in battle, and they sometimes let their emotions get control. Their eyes will swirl like the whirlpools itself. To them, they find their eyes to be a cruise more than a gift, so they normally try not to get to their emotions out of hand. Also, the reason they hate their eyes more is because when they cry, their tears become crystals that in the inside has an awesome whirlpool blue color and whirlpool design that can cost quite high if someone gets their hands on it. Their most prized item. Other than knowing and respecting nature and what's around them, they have one powerful weapon used to protect their home. It was called the Staff of Rebirth and Death. Only the clan leaders could use the staff. Chapter 2, Water Dancers Dance. Naruto kept spinning the water more and more before he stopped and started to move his hands up more and more. The whirlpools started to move up, but they were still spinning. He closed his eyes and heard the rushing water and the small droplets that hit the water as the water spun more and more. The woman, who was watching, gasped and thought to herself, "What is he doing? I don't think I've seen anyone have so much control over the water like he does. And why are they swirling still?" As Tsunami watched in wonder, she soon remembered the old story her father told her. She almost gasped and said to herself, "He's a..." She stopped when she saw him make two people out of the water. They were about his height. Naruto smiled to himself before moving his hands around. The water figures moved along with it. They danced and danced around. Naruto smiled more as he hummed a song in his mind. The water dancers danced for a while before twirling and moving away from the blonde. They soon stopped and faced him. Naruto placed his hands to his sides before the water dancers turned to ice. Their hands grew to sharp pieces of ice and their bodies had ice spikes sticking out of them. Naruto moved slowly to one side before they attacked. Their ice hands flew off and shot out to attack the blonde. Their hands remade themselves before they shot again. Naruto opened his eyes and moved out the way. He made twists and turns at each attack they threw at him. At each moment they took, the more they attack. Tsunami watched how the ice sank into the lake and the water sprang up softly. The blonde, who wore no shoes, moved out the way of each attack as if he was dancing. Each twist and turn, each jump, each dodge was as if he was dancing in the attacks. When the ice dancers stopped, they both tried one more attack. They threw one of their spikes at the same time at the blonde's sides. Naruto closed his eyes before he snapped them opened. His eyes were swirling. He jumped up and over the ice spikes. He landed on the water perfectly. He raised his hands up and a whirlpool shot out of the water. He then threw his hands down and the whirlpool struck the ice dancers. Then as the water hit them, it too changed to ice. But inside you could see the ice dancers being twisted and turned around and around as if even though the whirlpool they were in was made of ice, the inside was still a whirlpool. Once the ice dancers broke so much, all that was left was just small bits of ice. Naruto moved his right hand to his side fast. The ice then melted and went back into the lake. Naruto let a sigh out before turning around only to see the house and the moon above it. He walked over not seeing anyone. Tsunami had went back inside fast when she saw him about to turn around. Tsunami stood outside of her father's guest's room and felt her heart race. She had ran as fast as she could before the blonde could see her. As she heard his footsteps enter the guest's room softly and the closing of the door, she heard him sit on the bed and the sounds of blankets and sheets moved around. She waited for a while until she moved. She moved down the hall and into the kitchen. As she sat on a chair, she let her mind wander more and more. Next morning, Tsunami was quiet. She was keeping to herself. As she turned, she saw Kakashi, Sasuke, Sakura, her son, and her father looking at her with wonder. She turned and tried not to look at them. She knew the blonde had not told anyone. How? Because the first time she saw the blonde, she knew he was hiding something from his team. Each time he spoke to them, it was as if he was hiding something, and now she knew what that something was. Sakura then asked out loud, "Hey, where's Naruto, man? That idiot sure can sleep." Tsunami almost dropped the fork she was washing and everyone looked at her again. She blinked and said, covering up the fact that she really knew why the blonde was sleeping, "He was out training last night. He went out when I was up and told me not to wake you guys up while he went training." She laughed nervously. Sasuke scoffed and said, "That dope. Why does he need to train so late at night, huh? Well, it doesn't matter really. He'll still be weak no matter what training he does." Tsunami this time did drop the fork when she heard those words and heard, "Yeah, you're right, Sasuke-kun. I don't even know why he's a ninja. He sure is weak." From the pink-haired girl. Tsunami turned and watched the sensei, hoping he would say something, but all she saw was him reading his book. Not saying anything. He wasn't standing up for the blonde. He was too busy to even hear that the blonde's teammates were saying about him. She clutched her teeth a bit before saying in a sharp tone, "Well, maybe unlike you both, he is trying to correct his flaws by training his ass off as much as he can so he doesn't become overconfident pricks like you both." Inari's eyes widened as he heard what his mother just said. She had just defined the blonde boy he too thought was weak. Her father was even surprised at this change in her mood. Kakashi almost dropped his book, while Sakura shut up and Sasuke's eyes widened. They saw Tsunami turn and wash the dishes again before hearing someone say, "Hey guys, good morning." Naruto walked in, not noticing the tense air around them. He sat right down and said, "So what's for breakfast?" I'm hungry. He smiled brightly. Tsunami smiled and said, pancakes? I hope you like them. Naruto smiled also and said, okay. Tsunami walked over and gave the blonde some pancakes she had saved for him. She smiled and said, eat up. Naruto made a yum sound and started to eat the homemade pancakes. As he ate, he thought to himself, thanks for sticking up for me, Tsunami. Later, Tazuna walked up to his daughter and asked her, hey, what was that all about, Tsunami? Tsunami looked at her father and asked, what? He then said, you know what? The stuff you said at the table today. Why are being defensive about the blonde kid? She blinked and said, I have no idea what you're talking about, Dad. She had said those words as she saw Sakura, Sasuke, Kakashi, and Inari come into the room again. They were getting ready to go into town for a while with Tazuna and Inari. Naruto, on the other hand, was going to stay here and rest for a bit after his intense training yesterday. Kakashi then said, ready to go, Tazuna-san? Tazuna looked at his daughter before looking back at them and nodded. As they left to close the door, Tsunami heard fast footsteps. She looked back and saw Naruto standing at the hallway door. Only thing was Naruto wasn't wearing his jacket, so she could see he was very toned and lean. His blue eyes shone brighter than normally. He wasn't wearing his headband too. His hair was not fully up and it hanged around his face. He looked cute. Any boy or girl would have loved to have this boy as a boyfriend. She heard him ask, why did you stand up for me today? His voice was soft but clear, like a child's voice would, as if they were lost in a memory. She had never seen this side of the blonde before, but she then saw the courage, the softness, the good judgment and sadness in his eyes. She smiled softly and said, my father used to tell me a story when I was Inari's age. He told me that a long time ago, the whirlpools gave birth to people called the water dancers. For when they battled, they would twist and turn as if they would be dancing. They were given a blood that all wanted, but unlike others who received gifts for their blood, they did not exploit their gifts, they did not take it for granted, they did not gloat about it. He told me they respected the lives of nature, animals, and humans alike. They never took more than what they needed. They would show light to those who have lost theirs. And because of their good judgment, their soft but strong heart, their power to never give up and their will to protect the loves they loved, they continued to receive gifts from the gods. But he told me they were nothing but a story, one almost forgotten by most people. But you see, ever since he told me that story, I always thought they weren't a story, and if I ever met one, I would say these words, thank you. Thank you for showing what was lost to those who had forgotten. Naruto's eyes widened a bit before smiling softly himself. He then said as he looked to the ground, so, you know what I am, huh? She nodded before hearing him say, I knew someone was watching me last night, but I never thought it would be someone who knew what I was. Tsunami then asked, Naruto, you're hiding yourself from your team, aren't you? I can see the way they look at you. They think you're weak. Why not show them what you can really do? Naruto smiled and said, I can't. You should know from those stories what will happen if anyone found out. They would just use me and in the end get rid of me. Tsunami nodded and said, can you tell me how you found about your bloodline? Naruto then said with a smile, okay, but you can't tell anyone about it. Tsunami nodded softly. Chapter 3, Shifting Waters. Naruto sat down and watched Tsunami sit down. He took a breath and knew what to say. He swore to himself that if anyone found out, he would tell the truth. He opened his mouth and said, October 10th was the day my mother went into labor, but that night something horrible happened. Something I don't want to talk about. But both of my parents died that night. It was on a nice sunny day in Konoha when I found out of my power. I was kicking in the water by a lake that no one, only me and the old man, he's the third Hokage, knew about. I wanted to play in the water, so when I put my hand in front of me, I noticed something strange. The water started to move. First it was in a small circle, it just spun around and around, and when I started to move my hand around it spun faster and faster until it created a whirlpool. When I stopped, it stopped. I was shocked and surprised, so I got up and went to go tell the old man. When I got there and told him about it, he noticed my eyes were spinning like the whirlpools itself, and then he told me everything, who my parents were, who I was, what my clan is, everything. I was surprised and shocked, but he then told me I wasn't supposed to know until I was 18 years old, but since my bloodline woke up so early, he told me then. After that I vowed to become strong, to become great like my mother and father, to be someone who cared and loved the village like they did. I started to train harder and harder each day. But I swore never to tell anyone unless they see me or figure out that I have the Busher Gogyu bloodline. Busher Gogyu means spinning water. Big thanks to Mad Edie for this part. Tsunami then asked out loud, so only the third knows, not your team? Naruto nodded but stopped, now that he remembered something. Well, there are a few others like Irika-sensei. He's like a dad to me. When he got hurt trying to save me, I healed him up, and he asked me how I did that. The old man came and told him everything. Naruto then remembered that night. Flashback. Naruto smiled big as soon as he heard the words he passed, but his smile stopped when he heard Irika in pain still. His eyes widened and he said, Irika-sensei. He tried to help the poor bleeding ninja up. Irika smiled to Naruto and said, Hey, I'm okay. Just a little hurt, not too much. Naruto shook his head and said, No, you're hurt. Irika then said, Well, I might be a little but nothing too bad. Naruto shook his head again and said, You're really hurt, Irika-sensei. Let me see. Irika then fell to the ground in some pain. Irika smiled at the caring little blonde trying to look over him. Irika tried to calm him down, but stopped when he saw his eyes. Irika's eyes widened as he saw the blue in Naruto's eyes swirl around and tears starting to form. Naruto spoke again and said, Please, I can heal you, Irika-sensei. Irika heard the plead in the younger boy's voice, and he nodded. He let Naruto look at the wound before Irika felt something strange. He looked out the corner of his eyes and saw the blonde had placed his hands in front of him and they were glowing ocean blue. Irika then felt like he was in the water, and waves of an ocean washing over him. Then he didn't feel any pain anymore. Nothing. He looked to his back and saw Naruto smiling. He looked at Naruto for a moment before watching the blonde sit next to him and take his hurt arm. Naruto placed his hand on it and it glowed again. The wound healed up very fast. Naruto looked up and smiled to his sensei before hearing Irika ask. Knowing for sure that the blonde was no medical ninja, Naruto, How did you do that? Naruto smiled softly before hearing someone said, It's part of his bloodline, Irika. Naruto looked up and smiled to the Hokage who was walking closer to them. Irika's eyes widened and asked out loud, Bloodline? Naruto has a dash the third cut in and said, Yes, he does. It's called the Busher Gogyu. Irika's eyes widened very wide this time. He spoke the words out, to the Busher Gogyu. I thought that was a myth. Naruto shook his head and said, It's not, Irika-sensei. I have it. You saw my eyes, that's how you know. Irika looked at the boy before smiling softly. He then thought to himself, He truly is something different. The third then spoke up, I'll tell you everything, Irika. Only if you don't tell anyone about this. Irika nodded and listened to the story. Out of flashback. Naruto then said, Yes, some people know. But can you please not tell my team? If they found out, I don't know what they'll do. Tsunami nodded before she asked out, Why? Naruto smiled big to her and said, I made a promise to the third, and I don't want to break it. Naruto gave a sigh and looked out the window and then he saw the lake. He smiled softly before getting up and saying, I'm going to go train. Tell the others that I'll be back later, maybe before the sun sets. She nodded and watched the blonde walk out the door. She smiled softly at how brave the kid was. Later that day, Naruto sat in an unknown area in the forest and smiled as he hugged his knees. The butterflies flew around him softly, and so did the birds. Animals grew close to the young Uzumaki, knowing he was different from other humans they had seen. Naruto smiled softly and hummed to himself before deciding he needed to train. As he started to train, he moved the water in a nearby pond. It moved out from the pond and went to him. He twisted the water in his hands as if trying to make a whirlpool out of the pond, but he then heard a sound, a snapping of a twig. The water dropped and hit the ground around Naruto. He looked back fast to where the twig snapped. Naruto blinked trying to find whoever did that. He looked and saw no one there. His eyes softened before he went to pick up his jacket he had left on the ground from before his training. He looked at the woods again before running off to find a more secret spot. He didn't want someone to see, especially if he didn't know who was there. As he walked, he heard a voice in his mind say, Damn kid. Calm down, no one is there. Naruto smiled to himself and said in his mind, Sorry, Fluffy. I just don't like the idea that someone can spy on us. I don't need word getting out. Kyubi glared at the nickname but said, I thought I told you stop calling me that. And don't worry if anyone finds out, just let me take over and I'll kill them. Naruto glared at Kyubi mentally and said, Kyubi no Kitsune. I thought I told you I do not want the blood of the innocents on my hands, and you may have told me to stop, but did I say I was going to? No, I didn't, so get over it, Fluffy. Kyuubi growled in Naruto's mind. Naruto giggled at the cursing Kyuubi. As he reached a nice area, Naruto laid on the ground on his back. He stared at the sky and smiled softly before his eyes closed on him and he drifted to sleep. A person moved from the tree he was hiding behind and slowly walked to where he had saw the blonde run to. He too started to run. In his mind were the words, "He's almost like me." Haku made a dead stop when he saw the blonde sleeping in a clearing field of flowers. He walked slowly to the blonde and leaned down. He then placed his hands near the blonde's neck and muttered, "He's almost like me. He can move the water." Haku knew the boy was special since he saw him at that battle with Zabuza. He stopped and woke the boy up saying, "You'll catch your death out here." Naruto woke up seeing a kind face. He blinked softly and said, "Oh, hello, who are you?" Meanwhile, Sakura then asked out loudly, "Is it me, or was Tsunami-san a little bit protective about Naruto?" Tazuna saw Sasuke and Kakashi nod a little as they walked around the village. Inari was thinking about why did his mother care so much about the blonde, while Tazuna then began to think, why is Tsunami so protective with him? But still something is different with that boy. I mean, one moment he's happy and the next he's pissed off about something, almost like the shifting tides of water. And that strange symbol on his arm, the one with the spiral mark, where have I seen it before? It seems familiar. He was pulled out of his thoughts when he heard Kakashi say, "Tazuna-sama, we should head back now." Meanwhile, "Do you have a precious person, Naruto?" Naruto's eyes widened a little as he heard the person named Haku ask this question. Naruto was silent for a moment before saying, "Yeah, I have a few precious people." Haku then asked, "Would you die for them and kill for them if you must?" Naruto looked from the field of flowers around them both and looked at Haku. His eyes scanned Haku before saying, "If it was to protect them, then yes, but..." Haku looked at the blonde-haired boy and asked, "But what?" Naruto smiled softly and said, "I'll try to find another way than just fighting. I mean, sure, I have to fight to protect the person I care the most about, but we can't always fight to win. I mean, think about it, our lives are like the water tides itself, it changes and shifts. Just like life, it changes and shifts. One moment the current of water is one way and the next it's different. And in a blink of an eye, the tides of water can stop, just like life." Haku smiled softly before saying, "It seems like you care for even people you have yet to meet, huh?" Naruto smiled softly and said, "Yeah, but it's just who I am." Haku blinked before saying, "I better leave. My precious person is waiting." Naruto nodded and watched Haku leave. But before Haku was too far away, Naruto said, not even looking at him, "Say hi to Zabuza for me, and maybe we'll see each other later, Haku." Haku's eyes widened a bit and he stopped walking. The wind blew as the Uzumaki looked to the field of flowers. Haku didn't look back but heard, "And please don't tell what you saw today. Maybe next time we meet I can tell you about it, but for now I have to get going." Haku heard the blonde get up and walk away to the house of the bridge builder, now that the sun was starting to set. Later at the house, Naruto opened the door only to hear, "Where have you been?" He looked up and saw a pissed-off Sakura. He smiled his masked grin and said, "Training! I lost track of time, Sakura-chan, and I took a nap by accident." Sakura rolled her eyes in annoyance before saying, "Man, why can't you be more like Sasuke-kun?" It was Naruto's turn to roll his eyes, but then he noticed he did that right in front of Kakashi, Sakura, and Sasuke. Their eyes were a little wide at the look the blonde gave them, as if he found the pink-haired girl he was crushing on annoying. Before they could ask him anything, Inari said, "Still not believe that they could protect his grandfather from Gato. Train all you like. There's no way you can beat Gato, he'll kill you all. So if I was you, I would get out of here." Tsunami only shook her head at her son, and her eyes grew soft until the blonde walked right over to the ranting kid and bonked him right on the head. Her eyes widened a little but heard from the blonde, "Inari, just listen to yourself. You act like this guy is immortal or something. No one is immortal, Inari. Even Gato has weakness and even he can die. So stop acting like a brat that lost his ice cream and get over it. Because guess what, me and my team will stop Gato and we will free your village even if we have to die. Gato is nothing but a man that needs to be stopped for what's he doing. So suck it up and stop acting like a big baby." Inari's eyes stared at the blonde for a long time until his eyes went down and stared at the floor. He got from his seat and ran off out of the door. Everyone stared for a while until Sakura turned to yell at her teammate only to see he was halfway down the hall to the guest room. He needed a nap. Later that night, Naruto woke up knowing someone was near his door that went outside. He got up slowly and heard voices. As he got close to the door, he heard it was Kakashi and Inari's voices. He listened closely, only catching the words. You know, I heard what happened to your stepfather. I heard he was a brave man. Inari spoke now. Yeah, he was. Kakashi then said, I see. You know you're lucky, Inari. Inari looked at Kakashi and asked, How am I lucky? Kakashi chuckled and said, Because unlike Naruto, you have a family. Do you know why Naruto tries so hard? Inari shook his head. No. Kakashi then said, It's because he wants to prove to the village he has what it takes to be Hokage. It's also because he wants people to look at him. In his entire life he has been alone. He grew up without a mother or father to care for him, and yet he's still able to smile so big. He didn't even have friends when he was growing up. He's strong. If I was him, I would have gone insane. And yet he's still able to try. And he's still able to smile so big. Now that takes true courage and bravery. Naruto stopped listening and pulled away from the door. He stared at them as if he could see them from behind the door. He then shook his head and went to get some water from the kitchen. As he went out the room, he knew the shifting tides of life was changing again. Something was coming. He just didn't know what. Chapter 4. Tides of Change. Naruto woke up feeling the sun on his face. As he rose from the bed, he looked at himself in a mirror in the room. He noticed he had went to bed without dinner and was still wearing his orange outfit. He got up and stared at himself. He gave a little huff but then smiled as he remembered. That's right. The old man gave me something before I left. I have to open it. Naruto ran over and took something out of his bag. It was a small scroll with the Hokage's seal on it. Naruto smiled big and undid the seal, and with a poof his eyes widened. Inside the seal was some new clothes and 2 letters. Naruto picked up the letters and saw one was from the Hokage and the other was written by someone he did not know. He opened the Hokage's first. It said, Dear Naruto, hello, I hope your first real mission is doing great. I also hope you're having fun bugging your teammates to death. I find it very funny how they think you're a fool when you are not. Anyway, Naruto, the clothes you see in front of you was made by your mother before she died. It's a Uzumaki tradition that the expecting mother of the next member of the Uzumaki clan make a great new outfit for their children when they turn a certain age. I don't know if this will fit you, but I believe it should. Also, the other letter in here is your mother's letter. She wrote it a few days before she died. I didn't read it since she said only you may read it. Anyway, good luck, little water dancer. From the old man. Naruto smiled softly and chuckled at the last part. The old man seemed to like being called that, but he glared a little when the Hokage called him Water Dancer, the nickname the old man gave him. Naruto stopped and looked to the letter. He slowly reached for it and saw the sign of the Uzumaki clan on it, the spiral whirlpool. He opened it softly and slowly, and once he did, he saw not only was there a letter but a picture. It was a picture of his mother with long red hair, blue eyes, a soft smile, and she was holding her stomach that was round. Next to her was his father who had blue eyes, yellow hair. He had a big grin while he held onto his wife's stomach too. Kushina and Minato Namikaze. Naruto smiled softly before looking at the letter. He opened it all the way and started to read it. Dear Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, my dear son. It's me, Kushina. I wrote this letter just for you. You see, it is a Uzumaki tradition for a mother who is expecting a child to make an outfit for their child. The clothes you see in front of you was made by me. I hope you like them. I made them so when you're old enough you can wear it. Normally us Uzumaki women make the clothes for babies, but I knew you would outgrow it too fast and I really want to see you wear it for more than a few months. Hopefully you can wear it when you become a ninja. I don't know if it will fit, but please wear it. I put our clan symbol on the front and back. I don't know why, but I felt like I should. And Naruto, always remember me and Minato love you with our hearts and will always be proud of you even if you don't want to be a ninja. We love you, Naruto. Always remember that. Love, your mother Kushina. Piss. Your father sure needs a kick in the ass sometimes. He's been trying to look over my shoulder while I was writing this. I am so going to kill him. Naruto smiled softly and stared at the letter. He held it close to his heart and then stared at the picture of his mother and the 4th Hokage. He stopped and looked to the clothes in front of them. He smiled more and put them on. /N. I drew a picture of his outfit. If you want to see it, just go to my profile. Look for my D.A links and it should be the last link on there. I don't feel like writing it, but I will. Naruto's shirt has short, on his left shoulder of the shirt was a open small cut that you can see the fishnet under it. His short-sleeved shirt was a silver blue color and it had his clan sign in the middle that was a dark orange color. He wore long black gloves that were cut-off finger gloves, he wore long blue pants, and his weapon holder was on the right of his knee, 2 straps went from the pants to his sides. Naruto looked at himself once and twice and thought, wow, this really does fit me. He twisted to the left and noticed it fitted just right. Unlike his old outfit, this one showed he wasn't fat, in fact it showed he was very thin in tone. Naruto looked at his headband and knew it could go someplace else. He then took it off and put it on his right arm. He smiled softly as he saw his hair fall in front of his face. He smiled more and then said, I'm happy I've been training a lot, otherwise my face would be still chubby. It was true. Because of his training his face became slim and lean. A perfect fit for someone for his small size. Naruto poked his cheek and smiled before remembering, oh man, my team! Her rushed out of the room and went to the living room. Once he got there he saw Inari and Tsunami sitting eating breakfast. They looked up and stared at the blonde. Tsunami blushed a little but smiled as she saw it was the little blonde she knew. Inari's eyes were big, and he had almost spitted his milk out. They stared at the blonde who asked, hey, where's my team? Tsunami smiled and said, they and my father went on without you. If you run you can catch them at the bridge. But do you want something to eat, Naruto? Naruto shook his head no and said, no thanks, I better get going. He waved by and ran out the door only hearing, Mom, was that Naruto? Naruto laughed more and more as he ran to the bridge. Time passed him for a while, but as he ran he stopped for a moment and looked around. Naruto froze at where he stood. He felt as if something horrible was going to happen. He turned back and rushed back to the house. Not only did he feel scared for his team, Inari and his mother, but for himself too. He couldn't help but think that because of this mission, everything was going to change. As he ran back he could hear screaming. It was Tsunami. He ran faster and faster. As he reached the house he saw Tsunami holding a knife to her neck saying for the 2 men to leave her child alone or otherwise she'll kill herself. The men laughed before Naruto jumped up. His feet hit the first man right in the face. He did a black flip and landed next to Tsunami who was surprised. Naruto looked around and saw Inari near the other man. Naruto pulled a kunai out and threw it at the man who held Inari. It hit his arm and he dropped Inari. Before he could yell or anything Naruto ran fast and picked Inari up and jumped back to Tsunami. He landed next to her with Inari in his arms. Inari was surprised and yelled out, Naruto? Naruto then yelled out, Tsunami, follow me. Tsunami dropped the knife and ran outside with Naruto who was still holding on to Inari. Naruto jumped up and put Inari on top of the roof. He then went back down and even though he was small he still picked her up. He jumped up and put her on the top of the roof too. Naruto could hear the men cursing and saying things. Naruto looked at them and said, don't move from this spot and don't say one word. I don't want them to see you up here. I'll take care of these guys, okay? Tsunami nodded softly and so did Inari. Naruto then heard footsteps that meant the men were on outside part of the house. Naruto heard one say, where'd they go? Naruto rushed off the roof and landed on the water. He did not sink in it. The men were shocked and so was Inari. Tsunami nodded to herself. One said, a ninja huh? Kid, where'd the kid and his mother go? The other then said with a sneer, yeah, tell us and we won't have to hurt you. Naruto glared before saying, I won't let you hurt Inari or Tsunami. The men laughed as one said, ah, little newbie ninja thinks he can take us down. Well, kitty, why don't you come over here and show us? Naruto smirked and said, I bet you. I can take you both down without stepping onto land. The men laughed again before one said, let's see you try. The man's sentence was cut short when he was then shot in the face by water. Sure, it just looked like it splashed him, but it felt like you did a belly flop. He held onto his face in pain before yelling out, kid, how did you dash? His friend then cut him off. Dude, look. He looked up and saw 2 huge whirlpools next to the blonde. The whirlpools were out of the water swirling next to the blonde. Naruto had his eyes closed as his hands moved around and around. When he opened his eyes up he then said, whirlpool strike. Naruto then threw both of the whirlpools at the men. It moved on the surface of the water of great speed. The men didn't have time to move. They were both picked up by the whirlpools and once they were inside they twisted and flew in the water. The whirlpools joined and made a bigger one. Naruto then closed both hands fast and the whirlpool turned to ice fast. The men were frozen. Their eyes were wide and in pain. The whirlpool stood right where the entrance of the door was. Inari and Tsunami made their way down the roof and went to the iced whirlpool. Naruto walked over and said, "The ice will stay up for a few hours. These men will be to try to fight back." Naruto then looked to Inari, who was staring at Naruto wide-eyed. "Inari, I have to go help my team now. I need you to watch and protect your mother while I'm away." Inari then asked out, "What am I going to use to protect her? I'm not a ninja. I'm not strong." Naruto smiled softly and patted Inari on the head and said as he gave him a kunai, use this. And Inari, you don't have to be a ninja to protect someone you love. You just need to use your heart. You can't give in, and you can't back down. That is how you become strong. Naruto rose up and nodded to Tsunami, who nodded back. Naruto turned and started to run, not noticing Inari, who was staring at him. Naruto ran faster and faster and thought to himself, "No more. I'm not going to hide myself anymore. It's time for me to show them who I really am." He then thought of the Hokage and thought, "I'm sorry, old man, but I have to break this one promise." Later at the bridge. "Where is Naruto?" Haku asked as he stared at the hurt Uchiha in his ice mirrors. Sasuke's eyes widened as he heard his teammate's name coming from the ninja. He glared and said, "What do you want with my teammate?" Haku then spoke, "I have something to say to him. But since he is not here, you are worthless to me." Haku then threw some needles, knowing it was Sasuke's end. Sasuke's eyes widened as he saw the needles rushing at him. He was stuck. He couldn't move. As he closed his eyes and waited for the blow, he then heard sounds of the needles being stopped and the sound of water around him. He opened his eyes and saw Naruto in front of him. Both of them were in a small water shield. Naruto was on one knee and he was holding his hands to the shield. Sasuke looked and saw right in front of Naruto's face was the needles that were in the water and slowed down inside it. Sasuke then said, "And Naruto." He then noticed the blonde's outfit. He didn't know why, but he blushed now, knowing that the blonde can look this good. Naruto then pushed his hands up and the water shield fell to the floor. Now only water was left. Naruto looked to Haku and said with his grin, "Hey Haku." Sasuke's eyes widened as he saw the person he was fighting coming out of the mirror he was hiding. The person with the mask then said, "Naruto, I told no one of what happened. Will you tell me now? Will you tell me how your bloodline is almost like mine?" Sasuke's eyes widened more at this bloodline. He has a bloodline? He then noticed the blonde look at him and he stared into sky blue eyes. Naruto softly smiled and said, "Hey, your bloodline woke up, Sasuke. Your Sharingan has awoken." Sasuke's eyes widened again as he thought, "What? I didn't even notice they did." Naruto then said, "So, where should I start, Haku?" Chapter 5, Crashing Waves. Sometimes, even if you promise to keep a secret, it's sometimes better to tell the truth. Naruto, your bloodline is very powerful. If anyone found out, they would just use you for their own selfish needs and gains. And once you are no longer needed, they will destroy you. Don't ever let anyone like that find out who you are. Naruto looked at Haku and smiled before saying, "Haku, your bloodline is almost like mine, but you can only control ice. I guess your bloodline raised from mine. My bloodline controls water, ice, anything that has something to do with water, even humans." Haku's eyes widened a little and so did Sasuke's. Naruto smiled softly and said, "We are the Uzumaki clan, but we are mostly known as water dancers, and our bloodline is called the Busher Gogyu." Haku's eyes widened more once he heard the name. He remembered how his mother told him about the clan and its blood. How it was the Uzumaki clan that respected everything and did not gloat about their gift. How his power was gifted from them. His mother only told him once on the day he showed his mother how he could make ice. Haku then said, "The Busher Gogyu, the most powerful of all." Naruto smiled softly before saying, "No, we are not. We have weakness and we have flaws. Do not say we are the best." Sasuke's eyes were wide as he heard what his blonde teammate just say. He thought, "Not. They are, you idiot. Itachi used to tell me stories of this clan that could put even ours to shame, and yet he says they are not the best." His eyes narrowed a bit before thinking this entire time. This entire damn time Naruto had within his power to surpass us all. Even me. He could have been Hokage by now. Why the hell is he hiding it? Why isn't he yelling it to the world? He looked up and saw a soft-eyed Naruto. He then saw Naruto smile too. But it wasn't a big grin smile. No, it was a soft smile, a rare smile. Sasuke blinked as he saw this and blushed a little. Naruto then said, "I have always wanted to test myself against a ice shaper. Let's see how you do against a water dancer." Haku nodded slowly. He too wanted to test himself against someone like him. Meanwhile, Kakashi felt a strange power someplace where Sasuke was. It felt like Naruto's, but at the same time it felt bigger, stronger, and powerful. Even Zabuza felt it. It felt like a wave of water rushed over them fast. At first Kakashi thought it might be Kyuubi's, but it wasn't. It was something different, something he never felt before, but at the same time he knew he had. Kakashi then said, "What is Naruto doing?" Meanwhile, Naruto held onto a small spinning whirlpool in his hand. He let it fly above his hand. Naruto took aim and said, "Frozen spin." He threw it, and once it left his hands it transformed into ice. The sides of this whirlpool were sharp. It spun in the air and went to Haku, who watched the iced whirlpool rush at him. In a moment he jumped. Once he landed he jumped again when he saw the blonde throw another one. Each time he threw one, he could make a new one come forth. Haku missed the seventh one and threw a few needles. Naruto moved out the way this time and landed near water. He smirked and said, "Not bad." Naruto then saw the water around Haku's feet. Naruto closed his eyes and said as he placed his right hand on the ground, "Ice field." Haku's eyes widened as he saw huge ice spikes shoot up around him. The water on the ground reformed and became those spikes. He moved out the way fast, trying not to get hit by the spikes, but each time he placed his foot on the ground more spikes come from the ground. Naruto still had his hand on the ground. He smirked before twisting his hand a bit to the left, and a wave of spikes shot out of the ground at Haku. Haku felt one spike his arm. In pain he was thrown in the air by the spikes. As he was in the air his eyes landed on the blonde that was looking at the water. His own eyes widened as he thought, the blonde needs to concentrate on the water. Not on me. Haku reached for some needles and threw some at the blonde, who at that moment looked up fast. Naruto was hit and his hand lifted from the ground. All the ice fell and returned to water. Naruto felt the needles and cursed to himself. He stopped and smiled softly before watching Haku land on the ground perfectly. They stared at each other before Naruto said, "You're not bad, Ice Shaper, but you're not good enough." Naruto smiled softly as he raised his hand and yelled out, "Water bubble." He clutched his hand and the water around him rushed. Naruto smiled softly and held the water ball in his hand. He pulled it close to him and put it near his mouth. He watched the water swirl in the ball before he blew softly. The bubble then rose off of his hands and flew for a moment. Haku and Sasuke blinked as they saw the bubble. What was it going to do? They watched and Sasuke turned to look at Naruto. What he saw made his eyes widened. Nothing. Naruto was gone. In wonder Sasuke looked around trying to find his blonde teammate, only to see knowing. He heard, "Seems as if Naruto ran away." He turned and saw Haku, who stared at where the blonde was, not noticing that the little bubble was coming his way faster. Haku then said, "I guess you're no use to me." As Haku raised his hand to throw some needles he stopped and turned to his side. The bubble was very close and it growing bigger and bigger. As Haku turned all the way he saw water pushing its way out of the bubble and then pop! The bubble busted fast and water spilled around him. Haku didn't understand what made the bubble burst. He stopped when he felt cold metal on his neck. He slowly turned back and saw Naruto standing there with a kunai in one hand and a smile on his face. He said, "Water bubble. I become one with the water in the bubble and can speed up or slow down to my opponent as a small bubble. Cool, huh? Once the bubble gets bigger and bigger it pops and water runs around everywhere on the floor. And since I become one with the water I can reshape myself in front, at the sides, or even behind my opponent." Haku gulped as he felt the metal go harder on his skin. He let his hands go down before saying, "Not bad." He then did a one-hand sign and said, "Dominic Ice Mirrors." Naruto's eyes widened as he saw the water rise and become mirrors around him and Sasuke. He felt a sharp pain as Haku elbowed him in the gut. Before Naruto could stop him, Haku jumped to the mirror and went inside of it. Everything happened to the part where Sasuke passes out. "Yes, I'm being lazy right now." Naruto watched Sasuke take the hit. Naruto trembled before saying softly to himself, no, don't, e. Naruto's hands trembled as he raced at Sasuke. Before he hit the ground. When Naruto caught him he asked, "Why did you?" Before he could finish he heard, "Heh, I don't know. My body just moved on its own." Naruto watched as Sasuke's eyes dulled. "Naruto, why? Why didn't you tell me about your bloodline? Why didn't you tell us?" Sasuke asked, wanting to know why his best friend never said anything. Naruto bit his lip and said, "Someone once told me that if anyone found out, they'll just use me, and once they are done with me, they'll destroy me." Sasuke waited and asked, Who told you that? Naruto was quiet. He muttered, I don't know. I don't remember him that much. Sasuke smirked softly but then said, Idiot. You can't remember. Naruto stared at Sasuke before saying, Don't move. When I'm done I want you to rest. Sasuke blinked before watching Naruto raise his hands and put them over his body. Sasuke waited as his eyes slowly watched as they grew heavy. He felt strange, almost like a wave of calming water was washing over him. He took a breath for a moment as his eyes closed. Naruto smiled softly before looking to the mirrors. Haku was surprised that the blonde had healed him so fast without using hand signs. But he stopped when he remembered the old story water dancers are not only known for their moments in battle and their cunning and strength and thoughts, but for their healing powers also. They can heal greater than any medical ninja. It's like something in their blood makes them able to use the water around them or in them to heal the wounds on the outside. Naruto rose and asked, Why? You almost killed him. Haku was silent and said, It's his own fault. He ran in the way of the attack to protect you. He was willing to do that for you. Do you understand that? He was willing to die for you. Naruto closed his eyes and said, I know, and so am I. Naruto's eyes snapped open and he said, Let's finish this. No more playing around. Naruto raised both of his hands and let the water come to his hands. Naruto kept his hands up before it created the most biggest of all whirlpools out of the water. He then said, Whirlpool strike. Haku's eyes widened and he flew back into an ice mirror. He saw the water fly around him fast. Breaking the mirrors hard, Haku felt the water get colder around him. His eyes widened when he realized his mirror could not protect him and that the water was getting more colder as it rushed at him. He flew out of the mirror and landed far from the whirling whirlpool. He looked back and stared as the whirlpool destroyed the mirrors and then it froze. Haku saw the broken mirrors in the ice spin fast before shredding into nothing, and it created something he had never seen before. An ice statue, but inside the water moved harshly, ready to kill its victim if any were inside. Haku took a breath. His breathing was hard and he could see it because of the cold winds around him. He stopped when he heard the footsteps. He closed his eyes and turned ready for anything. He opened his eyes and met blue eyes and a soft smiling face. Naruto put his hand out and said, Great battle, Haku. I nearly lost all of my chakra with that last attack. Most people don't realize what the whirlpool will do before it's too late, and they get caught in its current. Haku stared at the hand and waited for a moment. He smiled under his mask and shook the hand. Naruto then said, Haku, you can take the mask off, you know? Haku nodded and said, I know. I normally keep this on to hide who I really am. Zabuza says it's to protect me. Naruto laughed for a moment and said, I see. It makes sense. Everyone knows his face and name but no one knows yours, so you can go around with no fear. Haku nodded but said, Yeah. The only thing I have to fear is guys asking me out and chasing me. Naruto laughed again at that idea alone. Haku did look like a girl, so it was easy to get confused. The only reason Naruto knew Haku was a boy because Kyuubi told him. Haku laughed along with Naruto for a moment in the mist. That was until it happened. He sensed that Zabuza was in danger. Naruto saw Haku disappear into the mist. Naruto stood there not understanding what was going on until he heard the chirping of birds or what seemed like it. Naruto waited, hoping to hear anything. But all he saw was mist and all he heard was the water of the waves crashing down below. Something in his gut told him something wasn't right. So in a rush Naruto raised his hands up and flung them down. The mist turned into small ice crystals in a flash. He watched them clatter to the floor in a hurry, and the mist disappear in front of him. What he saw made his eyes widen and his body reach a panic. No one but the third Hokage and Kyuubi knew Naruto hated the sight of blood. He was squeamish around it. And if he even saw a paper cut, he would rush to the person in order to heal them up. Blood was one thing Naruto couldn't stand. He understood if it was his blood. He didn't mind if it was his own, but if it was someone else's then. Only then would he begin to panic. So when he saw Haku standing in front of Zabuza blocking his sensei attack, Naruto panicked.
Ho Haku!
Naruto yelled out. The water below the bridge crashed harder and harder. Kakashi's eyes widened when he realized that the young man blocked the attack for Zabuza, but his eyes widened more when he heard his student yell out the name of the young man. He pulled back and Haku started to fall to the floor, but Zabuza caught him. Haku spoke to Zabuza with the strength he had left, and Zabuza had no words left. Haku was like a son to him, and Zabuza didn't know what to do. Naruto stared wide-eyed before his mind raced with many questions until something came up. Gio, help him. His mind yelled out, clearing all the thoughts of confusion and fear from inside him. Naruto took a breath and ran to Haku and Zabuza. Zabuza was holding onto Haku as he knelt to the floor. He suddenly saw someone near him, kneeling next to Haku on the other side. Zabuza was about ready to attack until he heard, "I can heal him. Please let me. I can save him." He stared into what he thought was blue eyes, but his own eyes widened as he saw the spinning whirlpool inside them. He then said to himself, not believing what he was seeing, "Why, Yura?" Naruto nodded softly and placed his hands above Haku and let them glow ocean blue. Haku's eyes had closed and his breathing was fading. Naruto put his hands over Haku's body and took a breath as he started to heal. The wounds over Haku started to fade and heal, and the breathing was returning. Naruto kept at it for a while, healing the wounds and letting his power wash over Haku's. When the blue started to fade, Naruto kept at it. Naruto didn't want to lose Haku. Haku was one of the few that understood what it was like to hide your powers, to be afraid of what it could do. When Naruto stopped healing, he took many breaths. He had not healed someone when his chakra was almost gone. It was hard for him to even stay up now. He had drained his power and was about to pass out from it. He could hear someone, "And Naruto? How did you do that?" He stared up and smiled to Kakashi, saying, "Haku is a good person. He can't die, Kakashi-sensei." "Not yet." He then looked to Zabuza, who just stared at the smiling blonde. Naruto said, "He's gonna make it. Don't worry. Let him sleep and he'll be fine." Zabuza didn't know what to say to that. He just said, "So, they are still alive. You're one of them, are you not?" Naruto nodded and said, "Yes. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, one of the very few of them left." Zabuza nodded and said, "I see. Haku told me that he knew you were different when he saw you the first time. I just thought he was imagining it." Naruto laughed for a moment to himself. He looked up and saw Kakashi still standing there. Naruto took a breath and said, "I have stuff to explain, don't I?" Kakashi nodded, but his face looked to his side. Naruto looked up and so did Zabuza. The man Gato smirked as he clapped his hands. He then said to his men, "Kill them all except the blonde kid." Kakashi's eye widened and he placed a hand in front of Naruto and Haku, who was still out. He then said, "What do you want with Naruto?" Gato grinned more and he said, "Didn't you just see what he just did? He healed that boy without hand signs. You really don't know what you have there." Naruto's eyes widened and he looked down to Haku. Naruto felt his vision blur for a moment. His mind raced again. He heard Gato say, "I took the liberty to look up on the brats that took down Zabuza, and I found some interesting things from my spy in Konoha." Kakashi's eyes widened once he heard those words. "It seems that boy has a hidden past. So my spy dug deeper into his records and found something no one was supposed to know. You see, he's a true Uzumaki. In other words, he's a real water dancer." Naruto took a breath, Kakashi looked down, and Zabuza glared for a moment. Naruto looked down and tried to calm down. He knew Sakura and Tazuna could hear what was going on. They just couldn't see him. He heard Sakura hold her breath in a hitch. Naruto closed his eyes and heard the waves crashing harder. A real water dancer, most people believe they are myths and legends. I, in fact, don't think they are. I had seen one, but that was when I was a small boy. I never in all my life had seen such an amazing thing. Since then, I've always wanted to get my hands on one. If I got my hands on one, I cannot die. They heal me whenever I got sick or even near death. They can control the waters around them. Who knows what treasure lies under them? And their tears. Those tears can sell high on the black market alone, and that's if someone just wants one. But what's rarer is that it's a male Uzumaki. I heard that it's normally only females born in that clan. A male is born only every 400 years or even longer, such a rare sight if you ask me, so men kill all of them but the blonde kid. Once we get our hands on him, we'll be richer than any king. The men around him smiled big at that idea. Kakashi stood in front of his student, and Zabuza rose saying, "This kid saved Haku's life. There is no way I'm letting you near him." Kakashi took a glance at Naruto, who was looking and clutching his hands on his pants. He could see that Naruto was breathing hard for two reasons. One, he was about ready to pass out, and two, his secret was exposed fully. He saw Naruto's face scrunch up in both anger and pain, and then he saw Naruto's eyes. They were bright blue and the whirlpool inside them swam around faster and faster. And all Kakashi could hear was the water below them crashing harder and harder. Chapter 6. raging maelstrom and calming waters. Naruto rose from the ground and his eyes glared at Gato. The waters down below still crashed harder than before. Naruto took a breath and said, "I'm not going to let you hurt them." Gato raised an eyebrow at the blonde before saying with a smirk, "Heh, you and what army kid? Your powers are great, and once I get my hands on you I'll be rich." Naruto glared harder and walked in front of Kakashi and Zabuza. Kakashi reached out and said, "Naruto, don't. I can tell that your chakra is low already. Just rest. I'll take care of them." Naruto looked back. His eyes was dark blue and the whirlpool inside raged harshly. Kakashi withdrew his hand and stared at the Uzumaki, who said, "I'll be okay. Just promise me you'll protect the others if anything happens to me." Kakashi stared more and was about to say something but heard, "Please, the most important thing to a Uzumaki is the people he or she cares for. If anything happens to them, I can't bear it. Zabuza, you too. I need you to watch Haku for me. If any of these guys go after Sakura, Sasuke, Haku, or Tazuna, stop them." Kakashi nodded softly before saying, "Okay, but if you even get into the slightest trouble, I'm heading in to save you." He saw his students smile before facing back to Gato and his men, who smirked. Zabuza muttered under his breath, "Kid, you better come out alive. Haku really likes you." Gato then said, "Come on, kid. Let's see what you got." Naruto closed his eyes and walked closer. He stood right in the middle of Gato and his men and his sensei and friends. They waited, and all they heard was the water below hitting harder, making it sound almost like thunder below them. Naruto stared at Gato as his men and him got closer. Naruto saw a few of them about ready to attack. Naruto took a breath. The air was cold from the mist and you could see his breathing. He then said, "Because of people like you, Gato, my people hid themselves from the world. But now..." Naruto's eyes snapped open. The whirlpool inside them spin violently. Naruto placed both hands in front of him and said, "I'm not going to hide anymore." In a flash, Naruto raised his hands up in the air. The water below shot up onto the bridge. Naruto moved his hands in circles as he heard the others gasp at the huge body of water. The water rushed at him, and each time he spun his hands around, the water swirled around him. Naruto watched as Gato ordered his men to attack. Some wanted to run while the others still had the thoughts of money on their minds. All Naruto could think was, "I don't have much chakra left. If I want to stop these guys, I need to stop them now. Looks like I need to use that just to." Naruto raised his arms up, making his body look like a T-shape. Naruto let the water rush around his hands. The water just rushed harder and harder with each moment. He watched the men rush at him, swords in hands. He closed his eyes again and yelled out, "Uzumaki ultimate technique, maelstrom strike." He raised his arms in the air, and the two water whirlpools that once swam around his hands joined, creating a much bigger whirlpool. It was far bigger than his whirlpool strikes. Naruto clutched his teeth together as he tried not to fall down from the rushing water above him. The maelstrom he held was nearly crushing him into the ground as it spun more violently and harshly in his hands. His breathing grew hard as he kept it up before flinging his arms down to the men as they tried to stop running at him. The maelstrom was thrown, and once the bottom hit the ground, the cement split into two once it touched the ground and spun at them fastly. Many tried to move out the way as the maelstrom rushed at them. Some got away, but most of them were caught and pulled into the current of the maelstrom. Naruto breathed before raising one hand and closing it while saying, "Ice field." In a flash, the water fell before it froze itself, and all those inside it did too. You could see their mouths open from both surprise and pain. The area in front of him was now frozen halfway. Ice spikes stuck out of the ice. He breathed before noticing a few of them were left standing along with Gato. He looked pissed as he yelled out, "Stop the brat and you'll have their cut of the money, boys." Those that were about to run sneered and nodded. Money always drove people nuts and would always have people doing things for it. Naruto almost fell to the floor from the maelstrom attack. It always used too much power. He felt dizzy now. Then he realized someone was trying to hit him with their fist. In a moment he jumped and did a flip back. Some took swords out and swung at Naruto, hoping to make the blonde give up if they hurt him. Each attack they tried, Naruto jumped out the way. Before Kakashi could jump in to save his student, he saw Naruto slide on the floor and stopped next to a puddle of water. Naruto raised his hand above a puddle of water and waved it. He said, "Ice blade." The water shot up and became a light sliver blue blade in his hand. He clutched his hand over it and blocked an attack by a man with a sword. He pushed the man back and swung himself. The man fell backwards and was cut badly. He yelped in pain and Naruto jumped back from another attacker. Naruto's breathing was getting harder and his vision was fading. He needed to end this. Naruto knew he didn't have much time, so with his strength he had left, he jumped over a man and dodged under a blade of another. Naruto jumped on the ice part of the bridge and kept running over the ice spikes and rushing at Gato. Gato noticed it and was about ready to yell to his men to stop the kid, but Naruto stopped him and took the collar of Gato's shirt. Naruto's eyes glared hard before he twisted around and threw Gato over the spikes right to where Kakashi and Zabuza were at. Naruto yelled out, "Kakashi! Zabuza! Take care of this guy for me!" Naruto almost fell to the floor as his vision dimmed. His foot had twisted when he had thrown Gato and was now throbbing in pain, and his knees almost gave out. His head looked to the floor and he breathed. But then someone, Sakura maybe, had yelled out, "Naruto, look out!" Naruto's eyes snapped up and saw a blade coming down at him. He jumped, but he still got hit by the blade on his arm. Naruto winced at the pain before running behind the attacker. In a flash, Naruto used his ice blade and smacked the back of the bald onto the man's neck. The man fell to the floor, knocked out. After a while, Naruto kept fighting on the other side of the ice field. It was hard for him to know what was going on. On the other side, all he knew was that he needed to keep fighting or all would be lost. Naruto's breath hitched as he almost fell to the floor. A man was about ready to knock Naruto out. Naruto closed his eyes, realizing he didn't have time to move. He waited, and nothing came. Naruto opened his eyes and saw the man falling backwards as he yelled in pain. An arrow was stuck in the man's arm. Naruto was surprised before he looked back. Standing there was Inari and the rest of his villagers, all ready to stop Gato and his men. "I, Inari?" Naruto asked out. Inari smiled. Naruto was about to say something, but he stopped. His body shook, his eyes widened, his breathing grew hard, and his legs wobbled harshly. Naruto's eyes closed softly. The voices started to fade and all he could hear was his beating heart and the waves down below. Naruto stumbled softly to the side as he tried to stay awake. He cursed to himself for using too much of his powers in one blow. Maelstrom was a good attack, but it used far too much chakra. Naruto felt his heart beat. Each thump made him dizzy. He held his head to try to make it stop. His other hand dropped the ball and it clattered onto the floor. Each step he tried to take made him stumble. Naruto took a breath and stared up to the sky before his eyes dimmed and his legs gave up on him. He fell hard and fast. His head crashed to the floor and blood started to drip out around him. All he could hear was Inari and a few others yelling his name, and the sound stopped soon after.
No.
Wait. There was one last sound he could clearly hear. That sound was the water below. It was calm now. Meanwhile, "Naruto!" Kakashi yelled out as he saw his student fall to the ground. After Kakashi took down the last man, he rushed to his fallen student on the other side of the ice field. Once he reached him, he turned the blonde over and met a soft, sleeping face that breathed even softer. Kakashi sighed softly before muttering, "He truly is Konoha's most surprising, unpredictable knuckle-headed ninja." Kakashi looked back to the melting ice field and saw Sakura, Tizuna, and even Sasuke come rushing over. Kakashi looked at Sasuke and noticed the boy was hardly hurt. But by the looks of his clothes he was once hurt. He was about to ask but realized Naruto must have healed him. Kakashi asked, "Sasuke, what happened with you? Naruto and Haku?" Many of the townsfolk came rushing over to check the blonde, and everyone heard the answer. Haku asked where Naruto was. And when Naruto showed up, Haku asked why his bloodline was almost the same as his. Sakura's eyes widened and her inner side thought, "What? That idiot has a bloodline?" She was about to say it was impossible but remembered what Gato was talking about before all this was happening. She heard him say Naruto did have a power that was forgotten, but she didn't hear what bloodline it was. "And what did he say?" Kakashi asked, wanting to make sure it was true, wanting to know if Naruto was truly what he was. Sasuke clutched his hand and said, "He said his bloodline is the legendary Busher Gogyu. He's a real water dancer, Kakashi-sensei." Everyone around gasped, Zabuza, Sasuke, and Kakashi did not. Kakashi looked down and saw the sleeping face of his student, and he sighed softly before hearing, What no way. Kakashi-sensei, I thought that clan was a myth, a hoax." Kakashi looked up and stared at Sakura, who was freaking out that her blonde idiot weak teammate was part of a legend. "Sakura, we all saw what he did. I don't think those stories are legends," Kakashi said, watching her face. Tazuna fell to the floor and he said in a state of shock, "I don't believe it. I used to tell those old stories of water dancers to Tsunami when she was Inari's age. How? I thought they weren't true. I just told her those stories, so she would get to sleep at night." Kakashi shrugged before picking his student up. The villagers stared wide-eyed as they saw the blonde being carried bridal style. Kakashi turned to Zabuza, who was carrying Haku in the same way. Kakashi said, "Come on guys, let's get back to Tazuna's house. I don't think he can finish the bridge until the ice melts. Zabuza, you too. You and your student need a place to rest." Tazuna was about to say no, but Kakashi said to him, "Don't worry. Me and my team will keep our eyes on him." Tazuna stared before seeing the blonde breath softly. He nodded before picking himself up. But as they left, Kakashi looked down to the water below and saw how calm it was. He sighed before looking back to the blonde in his arms. His eye widened as he saw the blood slowly coming off the blonde's forehead, and without waiting he rushed off to Tazuna's house to get the blonde healed. Next few days. It had been 4 days since that fight and Naruto's secret exposed. Kakashi sighed and stared down to his sleeping blonde-haired student that had been asleep since that fight. He didn't understand it. Naruto's chakra was back to normal. His wounds were healed and the more deeper ones were almost healed fully. His student had a bandage on his head because of his fall from passing out crack part of his skull. He had a few bandages on his legs and arms. Also, his breathing was normal. So why didn't the blonde awake from his slumber? More importantly, why wasn't I told? Why didn't Naruto or even the Hokage tell me about Naruto's bloodline? I'm his sensei, I should know everything about my students. Even the smallest detail. Naruto's bloodline is the most rarest bloodline and someone could hurt him for it if anyone found out. Didn't they trust me? I could have kept this a secret if I was told to. He is on my team after all, Kakashi thought. Kakashi heard a knock and looked up. There he saw was Tsunami with some soup. She smiled and gave it to Kakashi. He nodded softly. She looked to Naruto and said, "Hasn't woken up yet, has he?" Kakashi nodded softly and said, "Yeah, not yet." She smiled an unhappy smile and said, "Well, I guess all we have to do is wait." As she went to leave, she heard, "I've been meaning to ask you, you knew, didn't you? When we came back, you weren't surprised when your father told you what Naruto was. How'd you know?" She turned slowly and stared at the teacher. She smiled softly and said, "I saw him out on the lake a few nights ago. He created these water people and trained with them. When I saw him, I didn't know what to think. But then I realized what he was. Later the next morning, when you all left with my father and Inari, Naruto confronted me. I told him I knew what he was and said he knew someone was watching, he just didn't know who. I also knew he was hiding his power from his team." Kakashi stared up and said with a hint of anger, "And you didn't bother to tell me? I am his teacher, I should know this." Tsunami glared for a moment and said, "Naruto said he made a promise not to tell unless they saw him and knew what he was. That and he made the promise to your Hokage. And besides, if he could tell you, I don't think he would have." Kakashi was about to glare but asked, "What do you mean?" Tsunami then said, "That day when Sakura and Sasuke made fun of Naruto, Kakashi. You didn't say anything, nothing. You just sat there reading your book, not caring. Kakashi, I may not know how ninjas instructors or ninja teachers work, but I know this. A teacher must believe that each student has a chance, and that a teacher should never stand by and watch the other students say otherwise." Before Kakashi could resort back to that, Tsunami walked out of the room with a huff. Kakashi sighed once more before staring at the soup, then to his sleeping student. His eye grew soft as he thought about what she said. He sighed again and he muttered to the ceiling, "I messed up, didn't I? And here I told them to look underneath the underneath, and I couldn't even do that." He then started to rethink of what he thought about the blonde. Outside the room. "Man, how long is that idiot going to sleep?" Sakura said in her habit of calling the blonde that. She was met with a glare from Haku, Inari, Zabuza, and Tazuna. Haku had woken up the day after the battle and was shocked and amazed at what Naruto had done for him and Zabuza. Haku was indebted to his blonde friend. But sadly Haku had yet to thank the blonde for his deed. Also, each time Haku would enter the room the young Uzumaki slept in, he was met by a glare by either the Uchiha or the sensei. And when he was with Zabuza, the glares got worse. Sasuke had overheard Haku one night when he talked to Zabuza. He had learned of Naruto's life from Inari and had said why don't they take Naruto with them and give Naruto a far better life. Zabuza had thought about it and said it was a good idea, but soon they both left that idea alone when the next morning Kakashi nearly attacked Zabuza, saying that if they even thought about taking his student, he was going to kill them both right there. It was then they learned that Sasuke had told Kakashi what he had heard from the two ninjas. Since that day, Haku and Zabuza was not trusted to be in a room alone with Naruto. It was either Kakashi or Sasuke, even sometimes Inari, who would be in the room with them. Sasuke bit onto some bread and rolled his eyes at the pink-haired girl who was still trying to think of why or how Naruto was a real water dancer. Haku looked to the door as Tsunami came out looking a bit pissed off, and he sighed. Only time would tell when the blonde would wake up. Back with Kakashi. Kakashi left the room for some more breakfast. He was getting worried and was going to send a Masager bird to the Hokage after breakfast. As he left the room, he failed to notice the blonde's hand twitch softly as the door closed. Inside Naruto's mind. Ow, what the hell? Why do I feel so sore? Naruto asked himself as he woke up in a familiar sewer. He looked around before noticing two red eyes from behind a cage. A voice boomed around him from inside that cage. Why? Well, let's see, you healed your emo teammate, used water bubble, water shield, used whirlpool strike a lot, some frozen spins too, used ice field twice, you also healed that Haku kid who was near death, might I add, ice blade, and you also used maelstrom at half power. All in the same freaking day. By the end of that battle, you had far less than 25% of your chakra, brat. Naruto winced at the voice and said, Okay. I'm sorry for asking. I just forgot, okay. You know I'm not good at keeping track of my chakra levels. Kyubi growled and said out loud, Do you know how long it took me to put your chakra levels to its normal state? Do you know how many wounds I had to heal on you? You're lucky I didn't let you die. Naruto chuckled softly and asked out, And I very much thank you, Fluffy. I didn't know you cared. Now can I get out of here? I bet my team is worried. Kyubi growled again and said, Fine, and next time, brat. Don't overdo things. If you die, then I die. Naruto nodded and closed his eyes before a blinding light surrounded him and things stopped. Outside. Naruto's eyes slowly opened as he felt some morning sun hit his face. He groaned softly as he rose from his bed and looked around. He noticed he was in one of the guest rooms in Tazuna House. He blinked before remembering what had happened. Naruto looked down to himself. He was wearing his black tank top and his orange shorts. Naruto tilted his head, wondering why he was wearing this, but noticed the bandages around his body. In a moment he realized someone must have changed his outfit so they could put the stuff on. Naruto looked to his feet and saw one of them was covered. He stared at it before remembering he had twisted his ankle during the fight. He sighed and looked around the room. No one was there. He blinked before hearing something. The water from outside. It was swaying softly to the house. Naruto turned and looked to the door that led outside. It was calming, hitting the house. He could hear it loud and clear. Naruto put his feet on the floor and slowly walked to the door. He opened it and walked over to the edge of the house. He stared down into the water as it beckoned to him. Naruto looked around slowly before smiling to himself. And before anyone could see him, Naruto dived into the water softly. Naruto swam around in the water and kept going deeper and deeper into it. He felt the water calmly rush around him and guide him to the bottom. Naruto had learned at a young age to hold his breath longer than any normal child. He could stay in the water for over an hour if he wanted to. Naruto swam around the small lake fishes and watched the sun hit into the water, creating beautiful light. Naruto moved softly before something caught his eyes. Down, fair below, at the bottom of the lake, something was gleaming. Naruto stared at it before swimming down deeper. Naruto kept swimming until he saw the ground. He looked around before swimming past more fish that followed him, knowing the boy was far different from others. Naruto placed his hand on a small underwater cliff and swam past it. He stopped and his eyes widened at the sight behind the cliff. But in his moment of surprise, he let his breath go and the bubbles rushed up to the surface. Naruto realized this and also rushed back up to the surface in a hurry. When he did, Naruto took a breath of air and was in a surprise. His mind raced with thoughts. I've never seen anything like that. Does Tazuna know about those things? If he does, then why don't he use those things to help his village? Wait, I don't think he knows about the Cry Dash. But right before Naruto could think about anything more, he heard someone say, "Where the hell is Naruto, you bastards?" Naruto blinked before looking to the house that was now not too far from him. He then said to himself, "Kakashi-sensei?" Then in a moment he started to swim back. Meanwhile, Kakashi glared at Zabuza and Haku, who glared back at the sensei. Zabuza then said, "What makes you think we did something to him?" Kakashi glared again before Sasuke said with a cold voice, "We know that you planned to take Naruto, so where is he?" Haku had enough and was about to yell at them until he faintly heard water outside. He blinked before looking to the open door and seeing a blonde jump softly out the water and onto the patio deck. Haku smiled and rushed past the two glaring Konoha ninjas and attacked the blonde as he got up. Naruto was surprised and he fell back with a yelp, making both him and Haku fall into the water behind them. Above, everyone was quit and rushed outside. They saw bubbles for a moment before two heads shot up for air. Naruto laughed as Haku attacked the boy again as if saying thank you. Naruto and Haku stopped before looking up and seeing a hand reaching out. Zabuza laughed as he helped his student and Naruto out of the water and watched the boys wring their clothes out for a moment. Naruto turned to Haku and said, "Good to know you're both alive." Haku smiled and said, "I owe that to you, Naruto-sama." Naruto gave an uneasy look and said, "Please just call me Naruto. I really don't like that formal stuff." Haku smiled and nodded softly saying, "Of course, Naruto-kun." Naruto smiled again before looking to his side. Standing there was Kakashi, Sasuke, Sakura, Inari, Tsunami, and Tazuna watching him. Naruto stared at Kakashi before saying, "I have things to explain, don't I?" Kakashi nodded softly and said with his arms folded, "Yes, and let's hear it from the beginning." Naruto sighed before saying as he stepped into the house once more, "Okay, but can I get something to eat? Being asleep for a long time makes me hungry." Tsunami smiled and said as she walked next to him, "Not to worry. We were about to have breakfast ourselves." Naruto smiled once more before Inari, Haku, Zabuza, and Tazuna walked in too, leaving Team 7 alone for that moment. "Naruto, how strong are you? Just how much power do you have? There's no way that idiot has that bloodline, no way. Naruto, who are you? Who's the real you? Just how different are you from Naruto the idiot?" And at that moment Team 7 walked into the house thinking their thoughts. As the door closed, the water calmly swayed as the wind blew. Chapter 7. Water's Mirage. Naruto sat down at the table and ate some food. His stomach growled fiercely for the food. He laughed nervously before his eyes scanned around. He could see the others staring at him like he was some sort of rare gem or something. Naruto looked around trying to think about what to say. By the time he finished, he sighed softly before looking to Kakashi saying, "Where to start?" Kakashi stared before saying, "Let's start from the beginning, shall we? Like, how did the water dancers get into Konoha?" Naruto nodded softly and said, "Okay." Everyone shifted in their chairs and watched the blonde talk a breath of air. Naruto then said, "A long time ago, there once was a country known as the Whirlpool Country. It was said that from those whirlpools that surround the country that the Uzumaki clan was born. Legends say when they came from the whirlpool, they danced on the water itself before landing on the shore. The Whirlpool Country became their home and they lived for many years, until one day, they watched Naruto look down and say as he stared at his hands on his legs, a war had come and they stood to protect those that wished to live and have peace. But when outsiders found out about their gifts and powers, they enslaved many of my people and killed them when they were no longer useful or profitable. Then when that war was over, my people turned their backs on the outside world and hid themselves away, afraid of the dangers of the truth of greed." Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura were surprised at the sound of Naruto's voice. It sounded like he knew much about his clan, even if he was orphan. Haku looked down sadly as if respecting those that lost their lives. Zabuza thought of how greed can make anyone do the most idiotic things. Tsunami stared sadly along with Inari and her father. Naruto looked up and told the rest of the story. Many grew angry that the water dancers hid themselves when the ones they had died off and they needed new ones to replace them, and soon another war began. My people many hate violence, but if our loved ones are in danger we will have to kill to protect them. We were outnumbered and those who fight were either killed or taken. Those who did not fight killed themselves, not wanting to become slaves to those after them. Only one escaped from this war, or so we think. Everyone was quit. Kakashi spoke up, I see. Naruto. Gato said you were a male Uzumaki and that only women are born in that clan. How is that possible? Naruto stared up and shrugged as he said, not sure. But the old man said that a male is born every 400 years or so. He said it was a miracle I was born a male. Naruto nodded softly as he remembered what the Hokage had told him, and he then said, anyway, you see, my mother was maybe the only one that survived the attack on the Uzumaki clan. She came to Konoha for protection. Since the old man was the Hokage at the time, he had heard her story and allowed her to stay. He also said she had the choice to tell Konoha about who she was. My mother was scared from the war. She decided not to. Sasuke stared before asking, and then what happened? Naruto stared at him before taking a breath and saying, my mother was a different type of girl. She was tomboyish and loud, so not many people noticed her. Then one day when she headed into town for food, she came across my father. The old man said it was love at first sight. Dad fell head over heels for Mom. He ran over to her and asked if she would go out with him. But of course my mom was a tomboy, so she did anything a tomboys would do when some guy asked that. She kicked his ass and yelled at him for embarrassing her, but even after all that, he still followed her around. Naruto chuckled at that thought of his mother and father acting like that. Some in the room laughed a little, but Naruto kept going. My mother wanted to be a ninja, so she could protect Konoha because it became her second home and she was willing to die for it. Sadly enough, my mom was placed on the same team as my father and things never ended well between them, but after a while my mom started to warm up to him and soon they were the best of friends. But later they started to feel more than friends when they grew up, and they became something more than friends. But both of my parents had enemies, so they decided to keep it a secret until the right time came for them to tell, but it never happened. My mother died giving birth to me and my father died protecting Konoha that day Kyuubi attacked. Naruto said, sugarcoating the truth a bit. He didn't want them to know, not yet. He didn't trust them with his secret yet. The true secret of who his parents were and how his father really died. Naruto snapped out of it and said, after their deaths, the old man watched over me and raised me. He didn't tell me about my bloodline until it was activated, which did one summer day when I was 6. It was the only way to ensure my safety at the time. But after I found out, I knew I was going to be in danger, so growing up, I pretended to act like the fool when I was around people. I just masked myself with a fake smile so no one would know what I really was. In fact, I sometimes hate pretending to be a fool. It makes me mad that I can't be who I really am. Team 7 eyes widened, but before they could say anything, Naruto said, I made a promise to the Hokage when I was a child. I promised that as long as I shall live, no one was going to find out what I really was unless I trusted them. I promised him, but I broke it. I broke it to protect those I cared about. And Naruto clutched his hands softly before saying, and now my secret. Dear God, what am I going to do? What if that spy told someone and the news is spreading? What if he going to go after me or the old man? Naruto's head shot up when he realized this. He was about to make a run for the door as he yelled out, damn it, I need to get home. I need to tell the old man. But before could reach the door, a hand flew out and took his arm. Naruto struggled for a moment before looking back and seeing Kakashi had stopped him. Naruto was mad and was about to yell at him to let him go when Kakashi spoke. Don't worry, Naruto. I sent a Masager bird to the Hokage the day you passed out, telling him everything that happened. When he wrote back, he said that you'll explain everything and that he also said his snake Anbu caught the spy the day after he sent the information to Gato. The guy was killed on sight and there is no rumors about you going around Konoha. Seems like he was planning on kidnapping you when you came back and he didn't have time to tell anyone yet. Once hearing those words, Naruto calmed down and took a soft breath. He then heard from Sakura, wait, why didn't the Hokage stop him the day the guy took the information? Kakashi answered again, the Hokage didn't find out until the day after. He was looking into Naruto's files when he saw the seal unlocked, and so the Hokage tracked the chakra signal down and his snake Anbu took care of the rest. Naruto thought before saying, wait, did you say snake? Kakashi looked at Naruto, nodded. Naruto smiled and said, good to know he gave her that mission. Kakashi raised an eyebrow before asking, you know this snake Anbu? Naruto nodded and said, yeah, she's one of the few that know my secret, but of course she did find out by accident when she saw me training. She's weird, but I know I can trust her. Kakashi nodded softly before letting go of his arm. Naruto took another breath before hearing, so the Naruto we know is just a lie? Everyone stopped and looked back to Sasuke, who was glaring at nothing. Naruto sighed before thinking of a way to explain it. He thought for a moment and said, "Not really, no. The Naruto you know is like a mirage, really. The only things that isn't real is that I'm not really that dumb. But I'm not a genie's ether. I do like ramen, but I do like to eat other things too. And I know I'm strong, but I'm not godly, and I don't like to gloat about my powers unlike other people do." Naruto's eyes soon stared outward to the door that was open. He could see the lake as he said, "Power is a meaningless thing. No good can come from it, believe me. I have seen what happens when someone is drawn to power, and soon they are consumed by it so much that they have no idea what they are doing to the people they love when it's far too late. Same can be said about greed and revenge." Sasuke stared wide-eyed at the blonde, who closed his eyes softly. Sasuke was about to yell out at the blonde, but Kakashi stopped him. Sakura's mind yelled many things about how different Naruto was. Haku felt like hugging the blonde to help him calm down. Zabuza nodded softly before saying, "Spoken like a true Uzumaki." Naruto stopped before turning to Tazuna and saying, "Tazuna, are you aware that you have huge crystals growing at the bottom of your lake?" Naruto said, using his hands to show how tall the crystals were at the bottom of the lake. They were almost as tall as him. Tazuna's eyes widened. Tsunami gasped as she covered her mouth, and Inari's eyes looked like they were going to pop out of his head. Tazuna then said, "Why, you got to the bottom of the lake? How? I've been trying for years to see what's down there. Is that what's down there?" Team 7, Haku, and Zabuza stared at the blonde, who nodded as he said, "Yeah, I did. I was trying to figure out if you knew about them, but judging by their size and growth rate, you didn't know about them." Tazuna nodded and said, "When I built this house years ago, I went swimming one afternoon. As I swam around, I saw something shining at the bottom, but I could never get down there because it's too far and I couldn't hold my breath that long. After a while I got old, had a family, and I can't swim like I used to. I always wondered what is at the bottom. Are you sure?" Naruto nodded again and said, "Yeah. You see, when I was young I loved swimming and I can swim really fast underwater." Everyone stared at the blonde, who thought to himself softly as he said, "As a matter of fact, I can hold my breath for almost over a full hour." Naruto then said as he thought of an idea, "Hey, I know. I'll go to the bottom of the lake and get some of the crystals out for you. Then you and your village can sell them, so it can help rebuild, and use them to get your village back on its feet," Naruto said with a caring smile. Everyone kept staring, and before anyone could say anything, Naruto said, "All right, it's settled. I'll go get some right now." And in a flash, Naruto jumped up and ran out the door. All they heard was a splash. Everyone kept quiet before hearing Uzumakis are said to be powerful, kind, caring, loyal, and different. But they're also said to be crazy, hyper, jokers, determined, strange, great actors, and out of this world, uncontrollable. Heh, he lives up to it. Everyone looked back to Zabuza, who drank some water. He gave them a smirk and said, "I wonder what else he is?" The next few days, Naruto smiled and waved goodbye to the villagers of the small village. Ever since that day at the bridge, the villagers there respected Naruto and talked to him with much admiration. Sure, Naruto felt okay with it, but he didn't like the fact they talked to him with San and Sama, with his name. It got worse when Tazuna told everyone about what Naruto found, and showed them the huge crystals Naruto was able to get out from the lake bottom. It was only 4 crystals Naruto had picked out. He didn't dare to take too much, so he took out the ones he knew were loose and on the small size. As they walked away, Naruto ruffled Inari's hair as the boy started to cry. He looked up to Naruto deeply. Tsunami hugged the boy, saying he was welcome back anytime he wished, and Tazuna told him that he was a saint to them. But of course Naruto kept saying he was far from one. Naruto looked back and waved goodbye to the entire village as they did the same. His team and Zabuza and Haku waited for him at the end of the bridge. When they started to walk away, Naruto couldn't see the bridge or the people anymore. He turned back around and sighed softly. He opened his once closed eyes and met green eyes. Naruto epped before hearing, "Naruto, what's wrong with you? Not once did you ask me on a date all week." Sakura said, not understanding why the blonde wasn't bugging her like normal. Naruto gulped, knowing this would anger the pink-haired girl, as he said, "Oh, yeah, about that, Sakura-chan. You see, I don't really like you. I only said I did so it didn't look strange that I didn't like a girl. I'm sorry I fooled you." Team 7 stared wide-eyed at this. Naruto noticed one moment the hurt in Sakura's eyes, but it disappeared as she said, Oh, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's not like I liked you either. I love Sasuke-kun. And with that she attacked Sasuke's arm. Sasuke glared at her. Naruto sighed softly as Kakashi shook his head. Haku glared too at Sakura while Zabuza did the same as Kakashi. Naruto looked to Haku as he said, I've been wondering, how come both of our clans are different, Naruto-kun? Naruto smiled and said, oh, well, you see, a long time ago before the wars, a few Uzumakis went out into the world and one woman married a young man who had a bloodline that froze things. Sure, Uzumakis can do the same thing with water, but this man can freeze fire if he wanted to. When they had a child, she could only freeze water and control it. Their blood mixed more and more when their blood went down, and soon your clan was born. Your bloodline is only half of the Uzumaki's bloodline, no matter how many times someone in your clan marries outside of the Uzumaki clan. It just kept going until there were two far different water users. Your clan gives births to males normally while mine cannot. So to acknowledge your clan's birth, they gave you the name Ice Shapers while mine is Water Dancers. At least that's what the old man said. Haku watched Naruto look out onto the road before them as he said, many of my clan's books, scrolls, and secrets were destroyed or taken during the war. Right now I rely on old man to fill in the blanks on what I don't know. Haku nodded and said, so he's the only one with the answers? Naruto nodded this time and said, yes, so far. I was given 2 missions by him though. Everyone's eyes stared at Naruto with wonder. My mission from the old man is to find if any more survivors of my clan is alive out here in this world. If so, I must tell them of Konoha and ask if they want to return with me. The other mission to find any information on my clan's past. Books, scrolls, letters, anything. I'm the only living Uzumaki in Konoha right now, Naruto said with a hurt and sad face. Sakura blinked and was going to ask something, but saw Kakashi give her a look that meant, don't ask. Naruto sighed before muttering, the old man isn't going to be happy. Kakashi gave him a look before asking, why? Naruto stopped muttering and said, you all know and an entire village knows too. Rumors will be flying around that the water dancers have returned, and since I'm a Konoha nin, it's going to spread like wildfire. Sooner or later the council will find out. I need to talk to him, and all you guys are going to have to show up. Zabuza raised an eyebrow and asked, all? Naruto smiled softly and nodded to the sword user as he said, yup, and I suggest not to hide from him. He knows where to find people when he wants to. Zabuza and Haku stared at each other for a moment. They both had planned on leaving after making sure the blonde got to Konoha safely, but after hearing those words they thought maybe it was a good idea to see the Hokage. Next few days, they were reaching Konoha and had no trouble on the way there. No attacks or anything. Naruto and Haku were like two of a kind. Both understood how it was like to lose their loved ones and how it felt to only one of a dying clan. Naruto and Zabuza understood each other when it came to protect their loved ones and water justice. Naruto and Kakashi were on good terms now too. Heck, even him and Sakura were on better terms now. Sakura didn't find Naruto that annoying as much, but of course Naruto's prankster side came out once in a while, and that always annoyed her. As for him and Sasuke, it was the same as always, but sometimes it got really bad. Sasuke didn't like the fact Naruto had come from such a powerful family and didn't care for power. It just didn't make sense to him. As they reached the gates, Sakura asked a question that'd been on her mind. Naruto, where on earth did you get the outfit? Naruto blinked before looking down to his clothes. He smiled softly and said, my mom. She made it a long time ago before I was born. Sakura raised an eyebrow before asking again. How did she know it was going to fit you then? Naruto smiled once more before saying, it's a Uzumaki tradition that a expecting mother makes clothes for her children to be. But my mom said in her letter she didn't want to make clothes for me that I'll grow out too fast, so she made me this. I'm shocked as you are that it fits me. Sakura raised an eyebrow again as her inner side yelled, okay, but he looks cuter than me. How is that possible? He's a guy, they can't be cuter than a girl. Sakura and the others stared at Naruto, who smiled happily as they reached the gates of Konoha. Chapter 8. Lights made of water. The third Hokage heard his doors open and heard the footsteps of 6 people enter. He looked up from the evil paperwork and stared at Team 7, who had brought along 2 newcomers. He smiled softly and said, welcome back, Team 7. I hope you didn't have any trouble getting into Konoha with those 2, did you? Kakashi shook his head and said, no, Hokage-sama. None whatsoever. The The Hokage smiled again and said, "Good. Now Haku and Zabuza, come forward." Both Haku and Zabuza were a bit shocked that the Hokage knew their names but heard now. "Don't be alarmed, Naruto-kun told me all about you two in his letter he sent me yesterday. I also know that you both, a village and Team 7 know of Naruto's bloodline. Am I correct?" Zabuza and Haku walked a bit to the Hokage. Zabuza nodded slowly. Even though the Hokage was old, he was still a good shinobi and Zabuza didn't want to risk anything. They watched the Hokage take a bit of smoke from his pipe and puff it out. He spoke again. "This is a S-class secret. If anyone were to find about Naruto's power, it could end dastardly. Not only for this village safety but his also. Many people from all over the world wants to see and have a Uzumaki user for many years, and right when we are at a time when people believe they are just a story, this can cause some unwanted trouble." They nodded but heard. "But since this is Naruto's secret, it's up to him if he wants it to go around." The Hokage looked to Naruto, who took a breath and looked down. The Hokage then said, "If Naruto does not want his secret to go around, then it's best you follow his wish. If not, I'll be sending whoever spilled the secret to my snake Anbu, who will give you the most unpleasant time of your life." Everyone gulped a bit as they saw the light in the Hokage's eyes sparkle a bit and the smirk on his face. That meant one thing: whoever this snake was not going to let them have mercy. The Hokage smiled and said, "Now that is clear, I need to speak with Naruto alone. Kakashi, you wait outside with Haku and Zabuza. I need to speak with them later and you need to give me your report. Sasuke, Sakura, you may go home. And remember, don't tell anyone unless told otherwise by me or Naruto." Haku, Zabuza, and Kakashi nodded a bit while Sasuke and Sakura nodded too, but theirs was a bit unsure. As Kakashi was sending the others out, he heard as he almost closed the door behind him, "Naruto, we need to talk about the council members." XX. When the door closed all the way, Naruto took a seat in front of the desk and watched the Hokage place a sound barrier around the room. Naruto waited until he heard, "Now. Naruto, I know this might be hard, but I do believe it's time to tell the council members of your bloodline." Naruto shook his head and said, "No, not yet. I still don't trust them. Mostly that one guy with the bandages, what was his name again? Danzu Dozo?" The Hokage then said, "Danzo." Naruto nodded and said, "Yeah, him. I don't trust him, Gigi. He doesn't seem right." The Hokage nodded and said, "I know, I don't either. But Naruto, sooner or later they will hear the rumors from Wave. No doubt about it, and they will figure it out." Naruto nodded a bit but said, "Okay, I'll think about it." The Hokage then said, "The exams are coming up, and I'm pretty sure that the council will be too busy to notice the rumors. You have until then to decide." Naruto nodded again to the old Hokage. The Hokage smiled softly and said as he took a bit of his pipe, "Good. Now tell Haku and Zabuza they can enter, and tell Kakashi after they leave he may enter." Naruto nodded and got up. He was about to leave when the Hokage said, "Naruto, be careful." Naruto waited and nodded softly as he left, opening the door. He walked out the sound barrier area as it went away. Naruto looked down the halls and saw Kakashi, Haku, and Zabuza waiting near a wall. Naruto walked over and said, "Gigi said he'll see you now." They both nodded, and as they were about to walk in, but Haku stopped and asked, "Will I ever see you again, Naruto-kun?" Naruto smiled and said, "Maybe. Who knows what the future has for us?" Haku smiled softly and nodded. He turned back around and walked next to Zabuza into the room. Zabuza said goodbye before him and Haku went away and the door closed. Naruto sighed softly before turning to Kakashi. Kakashi spoke and said, "Naruto, I just want to say I'm sorry. If I would dash..." He was cut off when Naruto said, "It's okay, Kakashi-sensei. It was my fault. Besides, even if we got to know each other better, I still wouldn't tell you. I made a promise to Gigi and I didn't want to break it." Kakashi was a bit surprised but understood. It was important to keep promises, and if it was a promise was to the Hokage, then it was very important. Naruto smiled to Kakashi as he said, "I better get going, sensei. I have to go met someone." Kakashi nodded a bit before watching his blonde student walk away down the hall. XX. Naruto reached his apartment room inside. He shook his head before walking over to the phone in the hallway. He picked it up and dialed a number. He heard it ring a few seconds before it was picked up. Hello. Naruto waited a bit before saying, Hey, Anko, it's me, Naruto. I need you and the others to come by the secret place. It's kind of important. He then heard, On it, brat. By the way, did you just get in? Naruto nodded but remembered she couldn't see him over the phone. Yeah, not too long ago, just come by the secret place also, Anko? He heard. Yeah. Naruto smiled and said, Thanks for what you did. He waited for a moment before hearing, No problem, brat. He smiled before hearing the phone hang up. Naruto shook his head a bit before walking into his kitchen for food. Anko was the snake ANBU that knew of Naruto's secret. Even though her official rank outside was Special Jounin, her secret rank was ANBU. Only he, the Hokage, and a few others knew of this rank. He ate and soon headed out to the secret place. XX. Naruto reached the Konoha forest and looked around. Making sure no one was following him, he went inside. He walked for a long time before finding himself near a cave entrance. Naruto looked around again and walked into the place. He walked in darkness before light started to shine at him. He smiled a bit as he saw an opening where the sun was shining. When Naruto reached the outside, he saw the shining sun coming from an opening in the Hollow Mountain that only he, the third Hokage, and his friends knew about. Naruto looked out from the opening and saw the area around him. It had green grass, many trees and flowers. Animals were walking around. A lake and waterfall were together. It was paradise to him. It was his paradise. Naruto walked down the stone steps that went down to the ground from the cliff the entrance was on and went straight to the lake in a hurry. When he reached it, he heard, Damn it to hell, where the fuck is that brat? Naruto smiled at the voice of Anko. She crossed her arms and looked to the others in the secret paradise. Anko-san, don't worry. He'll be here soon. A soft meek voice said with a stutter. That voice belonged to Hinata Hyuga, one of the few girls that was ever nice to him back in the day. I hope he's okay. It must be important if he called us all. I said as her father nodded. Troublesome. I could be sleeping right now. By the way, where is Ibiki? Anko? The voice of Shikamaru Nara said as he looked up to the sky through the hole. All he got was the answer, busy with some spies we found. That's all. I wonder why Naruto called us all? Irika asked with wonder as he titled his head. I hope boss is okay. I heard he just got back from his first real mission today, Konohamaru said as his friends nodded. They all knew of Naruto's bloodline and feared deeply for the blonde's safety. Anko had known because she had found the cave and went inside when she was on one of her missions. When she had reached the lake, she had saw the blonde dancing on the water without chakra. When Naruto had noticed her, he fell into the water and didn't come up for almost an hour because he was cursing to himself for letting someone see him. But thankfully Anko swore not to tell as long Naruto let her watch his training, because for some odd reason when she watched him train, it helped her remember her past a bit more. Even Ibiki knew of Naruto's secret since he had followed Anko one day out here, and had saw Naruto training. When Anko and Naruto spotted him, Anko threatened him that if he told anyone, he would no longer be a man in this lifetime anymore. But he couldn't make it today. He had some interrogation duty to go through. Hinata found out too. She had followed Naruto one day because he had forgotten his lunchbox at the school, and she followed him to his secret place when they were 7. He had started to train with his water dancers, and one almost attacked her when it noticed her hiding. Thankfully Naruto stopped his water dancer and asked Hinata to come out from her hiding spot. When she did, Naruto asked her why she was there and she told him. After that, they talked about some things and Hinata swore never to tell of the secret, and Naruto promised to help her train so she can become stronger. That was one of the main reasons she pretended to have a crush him, so it wouldn't seem weird that she was talking to him in case someone was coming by. Ayam and Tucci had always known. They knew when they saw Naruto staring at a cup of water one day when he was 6 and the water in the cup started to swirl around so much it broke the cup, and Naruto was suddenly saying sorry over and over again. They both had been thankful that no one was in the stand that night, or otherwise someone else might have found out about Naruto's bloodline. And since Naruto was like family to them, they kept it a secret. Shikamaru was too smart for his own good sometimes. He had found out from watching the blonde's eyes one day. After he, Choji, Kiba, and Naruto snuck out of class, they went to go get some snacks, but the owner kicked them out. Of course, Choji and Kiba yelled at the owner for a good 2 hours that they didn't notice the dull-eyed Naruto sitting on the ground. Shikamaru, on the other hand, noticed Naruto's look, and when Naruto looked up, Shikamaru noticed the swirling eyes of water in his eyes. So with wonder Shikamaru asked his father if eyes could do that, and his answer was that of the legendary Uzumaki clan of Whirlpool. Shikamaru then was able to piece the puzzle after that and confronted the blonde a few weeks later, and Naruto had no choice but to tell. Shikamaru also swore never to tell the secret. Irika found out from that night with Mizuki. After Naruto healed him, the Hokage found them and told him about Naruto's bloodline. He at first felt a bit hurt that Naruto didn't tell him beforehand, but understood. He remembered greatly how his mother would go on and on about the legendary Uzumaki clan of Whirlpool and how she told him about how far people went to get their hands on said bloodline. Konohamaru, Udon, and Moegi found out because they were being nosy again. They had went to the Hokage's office one day and overheard Naruto talking about his bloodline. When they heard what bloodline it was, they burst in, almost yelling to the skies about that was so cool. When they were able to get the kids to shut up, the Hokage told them about the dangers that came with the bloodline Naruto carried, and they all soon swore to protect Naruto. All in all, they all swore to keep the secret of Naruto Uzumaki a secret until the day Naruto might get the courage to tell the world about himself. But by the way his progresses of finding other members of his clan was going, it didn't look like it was going to be any time soon. They stopped talking when they heard, "Sorry I'm late guys. A lot of stuff happened while I was away." When they looked back, some had blushes on their faces while the others held the urge to go awe at the blonde. They looked at Naruto's outfit and wondered where on earth did Naruto get it. Naruto then said, "Guys, have a bit of an emergency. My team knows about my bloodline." At that Irika, Ayam, Konohamaru, Hinata, and Moegi gasped, while Udon and Tuchi gulped at this. Shikamaru sighed a bit, while Anko quickly took out a kunai, saying with a smirk, "So, you want me to dispose of them, huh? Well then, I'll get right to it." Konohamaru, Moegi, and Udon agreed with her and was about to ask her if they can join in on the hunt. Naruto rushed over to Anko and said while waving his arms around trying to stop her, No, it's okay Anko. Please, it's okay. They already talked to Gigi and know what will happen if they dash." Naruto was cut off when Anko gripped his shoulders and said while looking at him in the eyes, "Brat, I need to know how they found out. Tell me now." Naruto groaned and said, Okay, but it will take a while." Anko smirked and said, "We have all day, brat. Now tell the story." He nodded and sat down as the others did the same. XX. Naruto had finished with his tale. He told them what happened at Wave, about the bridge builder, how he met Zabuza and Haku, how Gato found out thanks to his spy. Anko interrupted and said, "Damn bastard, if I only killed him faster." Naruto went on telling them everything up to the point with him and the Hokage. At the end they nodded a bit and understood what was happening. Some started to talk about the thing the Hokage told Naruto. Some didn't think it was a good idea but shook it off when Naruto said he'll think about it more. When Naruto looked out to the water of the lake, he suddenly heard whispering behind him. Naruto turned around just in time to hear Anko say, "Okay, Konohamaru, Udon, Moegi, you guys go get Sasuke and Sakura from their houses. I am, Tuchi, Irika, go find Kakashi. If anything, try waiting at the Hokage's office. Hinata, Shikamaru, stay here and guard our little water dancer, and I'll go get Ibiki and tell him what's happening, and then we'll go get this Zabuza and Haku. We need some time to talk to them." Everyone nodded and ran off. Naruto saw Hinata and Shikamaru stare at Naruto, meaning he wasn't allowed to leave until the others returned. He gave a sigh and muttered out as he laid on the grass, "This isn't going to end well, is it?" All he got was two heads shaking no. XX. Konohamaru, Udon, and Moegi rushed around Konoha looking for Sasuke's and Sakura's homes. When they reached Sakura's house, Konohamaru said to Moegi and Udon, "Okay, when we knock on this door we have to get Sakura to come with us and have to get her to has to tell us where that Uchiha boy lives, okay?" They nodded and Konohamaru knocked on the door. They waited until they heard footsteps. When the door opened they saw Sakura in a pink summer dress and red undershorts. She looked at them and asked out, "Yeah." Konohamaru stared at her before yelling out as he pointed at her, "Get her!" And in a flash, she was jumped by the three kids. XX. Haku stared at Zabuza as they left the Hokage tower. He then said, "Zabuza-san, do you think they'll allow us to stay?" Zabuza looked down to Haku and said, "They will more or likely let us join Haku. You are last of almost dead bloodline and I have many secrets from Mist. But what I want to know is what made you ask the Hokage if we can become Konoha Nin?" Haku blushed a bit and said something Zabuza didn't hear. He then caught on when he heard the name Naruto come from the younger boy. He nodded and said, "You're worried about his safety, aren't you?" Haku stared up and nodded, saying, "Me and him are a lot alike. Sure, our bloodlines are different, but not by much. I thought that, in all my life, I'd never met anyone who was like me, but now that I have." Haku stopped when suddenly two people jumped in front of them. One was a woman with purple hair and pale skin. The other was a man with scars on his face. Zabuza stared at them and had his hands on his sword for a moment. Haku was reaching for his needles, but both stopped when they heard from the guy, "Zabuza and Haku, I presume?" Haku and Zabuza looked at each other before Zabuza said, "That's right." They saw the woman pull out a kunai as she said while twirling it around her fingers, "We need you both to come with us. And don't you even think about running away." Zabuza sneered a bit and said, "And why should we?" Anko smirked a bit and said, "Because we can take you to Naruto Uzumaki." Haku's eyes widened a bit while Zabuza held a bit tighter on the handle of his blade. Anko smirked a bit and said, Now, don't get too hasty, Zabuza, we're his friends. Got it? I just need you both to come with us, we have things to discuss." Haku gulped at the smile she gave them while Zabuza eyed them as Ibiki sighed at Anko's strangeness. XX. "Okay. Where does the Uchiha live, Haruno?" Sakura glared at the Hokage's grandson and his friends. She then said, "And why should I tell you? You guys just jumped me and now you're holding me hostage." Udon sniffed as Moegi said, "No, we're not." Sakura glared at them and snapped at them saying, "Oh, okay. But then why are there ropes around my wrists and you guys holding the other side of the rope leading me like I'm a dog?" Konohamaru gave her a glare as he said, "Tell us where the Uchiha lives." Sakura then said, "And why should I?" Konohamaru smirked a bit and said, "Because we're taking you and the Uchiha to Naruto ni." Sakura raised an eyebrow as she asked surprised, "Naruto? What the he dash?" She stopped when someone asked her name out. Sakura. "What the hell is going on?" Sakura, Konohamaru, Udon and Moegi looked up in front of them and Sasuke standing there with a mild surprised look. Sakura only said, "Oh, Sasuke-kun." Konohamaru smirked and so did Udon and Moegi. They looked at each other and Sakura noticed that look. She then said to him, "Run, Sasuke-kun, run." Before Sasuke could ask why, he suddenly heard, "Get him!" And it was then he was suddenly jumped by the three kids. XX. Irika, Ayam, and Tuchi stared at each other as they waited for the Hokage to get done talking to Kakashi. They had entered right when Anko and Ibiki had left with Haku and Zabuza. They knew they needed to get Kakashi and go to the spot. When they heard the door open, they saw Kakashi coming out. Kakashi looked up for a moment as the door closed and he said, "Oh, Irika, Ayam, Tuchi, do you need to talk to the Hokage?" They shook their heads no and rose from their seats they had sat on while waiting outside of the office. Kakashi gave a eye smile as he said, "Oh, then what are you waiting for? I'm sure Naruto had went off to see you guys already, knowing how much he talks about you, Irika, and how much he loves the ramen Ayam and Tuchi makes. He likes talking about you guys non-stop." The three blushed at the info, but Irika said, "We need you to come with us, Kakashi. It involves Naruto, a very important thing about a whirlpool." Kakashi's eye smile faded a bit. He stared at them before asking in a low voice, "You know about it, huh?" Irika nodded and so did Tuchi and Ayam. Ayam then said, "Naruto-kun is waiting. Please follow us." Kakashi waited before nodding and watching them start walking. On the other side of the door, the Hokage only said, "I hope Anko and the others don't scare them to bad." XX. Anko and Ibiki waited outside the cave entrance with Haku and Zabuza. Both kept their eyes on the two jounin while their hands stayed on their weapons. They waited for a while until Zabuza asked, "How long are we going to wait here?" Anko smirked and said, "Not too long, we have to wait for the others to come." Haku then asked out, "Others?" His question was answered when they heard footsteps coming to the cave. They all turned and saw both Sasuke and Sakura tied with ropes around their wrist and tape over their mouths. They looked to the ones hold the ropes as Konohamaru said, "Now don't you dare of thinking of escaping. Naruto ni showed me and the others how to tie these ropes, so it's not going to be easy." All they heard was muffling and they turned back to see Anko and Ibiki. Konohamaru smiled and said, "Hey Anko, guess what we have?" Anko smirked and said with her grin, "Not bad for three little brats, not bad at all. Maybe I'll show you some prank moves since you got here on time." Ibiki sighed a bit and said, Anko, don't encourage them. It's bad enough you encouraged Naruto. I don't think Konoha can handle 3 more. Anko gave a pout and said, but Naruto stopped when he became a ninja Ibiki. I need more people to spread the pranks. Haku and Zabuza looked at each other and blinked a bit before hearing from Ibiki Anko. If the Hokage found out you're encouraging this behavior to his grandson and friends, think about what he might do. Anko stopped and thought for a second. She had a grin on her face at the idea and chaos they could pull, but it slowly started to turn into a frown before it changed into pure horror. She put her head down and muttered out with a pout, fine. The kids pouted while Ibiki shook his head. Sasuke and Sakura glared at the kids before they looked to Haku and Zabuza, who just shrugged. They all stopped when they heard more rustling. Out from the bushes and trees was Irika, Ayam, and Tuchi leading Kakashi. Kakashi blinked before noticing Sasuke and Sakura. Part of him wanted to laugh, but he asked, "Why are my students tied up?" Konohamaru and his friends grinned and said, "Because we didn't want them to escape. We're taking them to Naruto ni." Kakashi only shook his head while Sakura and Sasuke yelled at him to get them out. But before he could respond, he heard Anko say, "Okay, listen up." Everyone turned to her. She grinned wildly before saying, "What we are about to show you is top secret. This place is completely untouched by human greed for land, and only a selected few can know about it. This is Naruto's training ground and his home away from home. Tell anybody about this place and I'll make your life a living hell. And I make no promises." She sent a cold glare that rivaled any Uchiha's. Those that didn't know Anko that much gulped while the other sighed or nodded with her terms. She turned back to the cave and started walking in, and the others followed right behind her. XX. They walked for a long time, and those that didn't know this place was lost in their own minds. Sakura was thinking, why would Naruto train in such a cold and dark place? Kakashi was thinking, how on earth did Anko and Ibiki know of Naruto's secret? Haku was worried and kept his eyes on the woman who kept smirking. Zabuza kept his eyes on Ibiki, while Sasuke was thinking, how on earth did those kids tie him up? They stopped when they saw a light shining in front of them. They stared at the exit of the cave before the light blinded them a bit. When the light faded and their eyes got used to it, they saw one of the most beautiful places they had ever seen. Haku was in shock that such a place was there. Zabuza only muttered a few words like unreal, and no one has ruined this place. Both Sasuke's and Sakura's eyes widened at the beauty of the place as birds soared around them. Kakashi nearly dropped his book in surprise. But they snapped out of their daze when they heard from Anko, "Pretty, isn't it? Naruto told me he found it one night because he was exploring the forest. He showed the Hokage and Naruto deemed this place as his home away from home." Anko smirked softly before saying, "Come on, the brat must be getting bored." Anko jumped down the stone steps and the others walked down them. Those that were new to the place were in awe of the beauty and peace of the place. They snapped out of their daze again when they heard a familiar voice say, "Okay, ready for the next part, guys?" They looked to the lakeside and noticed Naruto standing up. He was holding a water ball in his hand, and sitting on the ground was Hinata and Shikamaru. Sasuke and Sakura were surprised to see 2 of their old classmates in the secret place. Everyone then forced on the blonde again as he moved his free hand over the ball of water. In a flash it broke into pieces of droplets of different sizes. He waved his hand again and they became ice crystals. Everyone watched the ice crystals stay above in the air. When Naruto raised his hand up, the crystals shot up and they got into a strange line. When the sunlight hit them, they created something some didn't see before. A line of different colors appeared all around them. It was like watching a wave of colors go around them. It was then they heard Zabuza say, "Amazing, it's like looking at the aurora lights." The colorful show stayed for a while as Shikamaru and Hinata clapped. When it disappeared, the crystals melted and fell on them like small raindrops for a second. Naruto smiled as he felt the water hit his skin, and then the wind began to pick up. Water and wind. To him it was a perfect mix. He had always loved both in his heart. He snapped out of his thoughts when he heard footsteps behind him and someone saying, "Awesome show, brat." Naruto turned around and saw Anko, Ibiki, Konohamaru, Moegi, Udon, Tuchi, Ayam, Irika standing there with Zabuza, Haku, Kakashi, and a tied-up Sasuke and Sakura. Naruto held back a sinker for a second and said, "Hello, Anko."
Iguis.
Naruto kept staring at Sasuke and Sakura. He then asked, trying to hold back another laugh, "Why are they tied up?" The only answer he got was, "Anko, Konohamaru, Udon and Moegi grinning and Sasuke and Sakura muffling out the answer. After Naruto had untied Sasuke and Sakura, he said, "Sorry about Konohamaru and his friends, they're a bit eccentric sometimes." Sasuke glared for a moment and said, "A bit?" Naruto only sweat dropped for a moment before Sakura asked out, "Okay, why are we here?" Naruto looked to Anko, who glared at the rude pink-haired girl. Naruto looked back to Sakura and said, "Sorry about this, guys, but Anko needs to talk to you guys for a while. It's all her idea, not mine." Kakashi made a upside-down U with his eye and said, "About what?" Suddenly, a evil aura surrounded Anko, and she stood right behind her favorite blonde brat, saying in a protective manner, "How about the fact that you all know about his secret?" Sasuke stared wide-eyed at the aura around the woman while Sakura freaked out and eep away. Haku cringed at the aura and Zabuza raised an eyebrow. Kakashi was used to Anko's aura and only shook his head. Konohamaru, Udon and Moegi ran behind a freaked-out Hinata and Shikamaru, who muttered out troublesome. Ibiki just sighed while Irika, Ayam, and Tucci moved away from Anko. Naruto gave an uneasy laugh and said while trying to calm his older friend down, "Anko, stop that. I don't think they want to be scarred for the rest of their lives." But it didn't work. Anko moved Naruto out of the way and glared the most evilest glare she had ever done and said, "If any of you idiots hurt him or even tell anyone about the brat's secret, I will personally make your own skin into a new coat for me to wear, and I will use your insides for soup, which I will personally feed to those you care for." Everyone who was scared of Anko nodded a bit, and those that weren't cringed at the treat. She then smirked and said, "Now, welcome to the protectors of Naruto Uzumaki Club. Now that you know his secret, we can all make sure he isn't hurt or used. Also dash." But before Anko could finish, Naruto yelled out in embarrassment, "Anko, I thought I told you, you're not a club." Anko stuck her tongue out at the blonde for a second before saying, "As I was saying, the brat here needs to be protected from everyone and everything. And as seeing that you morons haven't screamed his secret from the rooftops yet, you'll be the rookies." Sakura and a few others that didn't know raised an eyebrow at this. Haku then asked, "Our rookies?" Anko and those that did know nodded. Naruto sighed and just wanted to dig a hole and hide from Anko and her craziness. "Yes. Rookies, you see, the Hokage, Tucci, and Ayam were one of the first ones that know of Naruto's secret, and since they kept his secret this long, they are the commanders of this club." Naruto shook his head and muttered out, "Anko." She just smiled and said, "They other than Naruto have the right to command the lower ones. I and Ibiki found out a few years after and were in second command along with 3 others who we can't name right now. Then it was Hinata and Shikamaru who found out, so they are third, Irika is fourth, and Konohamaru and his friends are now fifth, now that you guys know." Naruto wanted to once again dig himself into a hole as Anko went on and on about it. He may like her as a sister, but sometimes she was just too crazy. Chapter 9, Water and Sand. Naruto only sighed as he reached his apartment door and opened it. After Anko was done threatening his teammates and friends, they sat down and talked about things. Sasuke and Sakura cornered him about Hinata and Shikamaru, but thankfully the lazy Nin answered their questions as Hinata stuttered out hers. Haku and Zabuza spoke with Irika, Ayam, and Tucci, who happily answered things. Haku liked Irika the most because he was a kind-hearted man that would do anything to protect his loved ones. Even Zabuza was eyeing Irika a few times. Naruto was surprised when Haku told him that he had asked the Hokage if he and Zabuza could stay in Konoha. When Naruto asked why, all Haku did was smile and Zabuza roll his eyes for a moment. Then Kakashi had asked him how on earth did Irika find out before he did. Then Naruto had to tell Kakashi the story behind that. After hours of talking and explanation about the others, they had all decided that they needed to go home and rest. Naruto reached his room and opened the door with a sigh. He walked in and took off his shoes. He then took off his shirt and flung it to the ground. He stepped near his bed and flopped down on it. He was ready for sleep. That was until he heard, "So, Kit, how's things been since I took my nap and after I healed you?" Naruto mentally glared at the voice but thought, "Kyubi, I want sleep. Go check my memories if you want to know. Also, Anko was using the 'I'm gonna kill you' aura again. I'm warning you now so you don't come crying to me later, okay?" He could hear a sigh of relief in his mind as he heard, "Thanks, Kit. That Anko lady scares me sometimes. Me, the Kyubi, the demon that killed many men and others in one night." Naruto chuckled before thinking, "I know. That's why I'm warning you. Night." All he heard next was, "Night, Kit." XX. Naruto woke up to the sun hitting his face. He blinked a few times before sighing. He slowly rose from his bed and stared outside his window. He looked to the blue sky and closed his eyes, letting the sun warm him up slowly. He opened his eyes when he heard a knock on the door. Blinking a few times, he rose from his bed and walked to the hallway. The knocking grew more. When he reached his door, he opened it and stared into brown eyes that blinked a bit at him. "Naruto?" asked Haku, surprised. Naruto was surprised too and said, "Haku, what are you doing here?" Haku blinked a few times again before saying, "Oh, me and Zabuza got a room in this apartment from the Hokage yesterday. We are living right next door. I was just coming over to ask my new neighbors if we can borrow some eggs. I just didn't expect to see you at the door." Naruto was listening, and when he heard the answer he smiled and said, "Oh, I see. I was wondering why there was noises next door last night, since no one has been living in that apartment room for years." Haku blinked but nodded understanding, but soon heard from Naruto, who opened the door all the way. "Oh, come on in, and I'll go get you guys the eggs." Haku nodded and walked into the room. Haku looked around as he stepped inside the hallway. He looked to his side and saw an open living room. He walked into that and saw the kitchen to his left. Naruto smiled sweetly and walked into the kitchen. Naruto searched his kitchen fridge for a moment before finding the eggs in the back. He smiled and walked to the front and saw Haku staring at a picture. Haku didn't notice Naruto walking back into the living room, but then he heard Naruto ask right behind him, "What are you looking at, Haku-kun?" Haku nearly jumped in the air by the surprise and nearly hit the shelf the picture was on. He looked back to Naruto and said, "Oh, Naruto, I didn't," but stopped when he noticed the smile on Naruto's face. He smiled too and heard, "I got the eggs, Haku." Naruto held up the eggs to the young ice user. He smiled at him before taking them from his hands. Haku and Naruto talked for a while before Haku had to leave. Naruto only said, "Come by any time and bring Zabuza over when you can." Haku smiled and nodded before leaving as he said, "Okay. Bye, Naruto." Naruto waved goodbye to his new friend and watched Haku walk to the next room and opening the door. Naruto closed his door and sighed softly before heading to the living room to sit on the couch. He stopped and looked to the picture that was on the shelf and smiled softly at the redhead, who gave a small rare smile, the blonde-haired girl that grinned, and the boy with brown hair smile at the picture. Standing in the middle and next to the redhead was himself, and by the looks of it him and redhead was about 8 years old, while the other two looked about a year or two older than them. He smiled at the picture before closing his eyes to daydream for a while. XX. A month almost flew by for Team 7, and each day always brought something new for them. Now that Naruto wasn't so tense around his teammates, he finally calmed down and had control of himself and of his chakra. When Kakashi asked him how did them not knowing his secret affect his chakra control, Naruto told him that his chakra was more connected to his emotion than any other people around the world. He told them when he got mad his chakra would flare and spark, when he was sad his chakra would dampen and fade. As for fear, his chakra would jumble around and act crazy. Naruto told them he was afraid of what they would do if they found out about his power, so his chakra would run around crazy, always giving him a hard time. Kakashi wanted to see what the blonde could really do, so he had both Sasuke and Sakura test him. The result amazed Kakashi. Right when Sakura was going to punch Naruto, Naruto dodged and created a water ball that captured her. When Naruto asked her to give up, she refused and passed out in the water ball from lack of air. Thankfully, Naruto released her before she could die in the water ball. As for Sasuke, he put up more of a fight. He tried to keep up with Naruto, but the young Uzumaki was very fast. Soon enough their battle started to take place on the lake they were near, and Naruto had no trouble water walking. But what shocked Kakashi the most was the fact that Naruto didn't need chakra to stand on the water. Sasuke couldn't get to Naruto, so he tried to hit him with some fire justice. Sad to say that didn't work. Naruto moved the water up from the lake, and that would make the fire vanish into steam. Suddenly, during the match, Naruto placed his hand on the water, and out of the water was his water dancers. The water dancers turned to ice dancers and would attack Sasuke many times. In the end, Sasuke was pinned to the ground by strong and huge icicles. So, Kakashi called the match, making Naruto the winner, much to Sakura's protest, Sasuke's annoyance, and Naruto's wonder. Naruto sighed a little as Kakashi left them, and suddenly Naruto was seeing green eyes in front of his sky blue ones. He epped and nearly jumped out of his skin by the sudden closeness that Sakura was. She seemed annoyed, wondering, and questioning. She then said, "Naruto, why aren't you as hyper as you were before?" This seemed to question her for a while. The Naruto she was used to was loud, crazy, and just plain idiotic. Naruto raised his hands up and said, Sakura-chan, I told you before that the Naruto from before was like a mirage. Now that I don't have to hide my secret from you guys anymore, I can finally calm down. I do like to get hyper Sakura-chan, but I do have a calmer side. Naruto watched as Sakura thought about it and nodded, accepting it. But both stopped when Sasuke walked past them. Sakura watched Sasuke before running off to follow him in hopes of getting a date. Naruto only chuckled before heading into the village, away from their training grounds. XX. Naruto noticed how some villagers were staring at him with strange looks, and he titled his head, not understand why they were staring at him like that. Was there something on his face? Some villagers, mostly girls around his age, seemed to blushing and giggling at his new looks, and many of the older ones did a double take. It had been going on like this for a month. Ever since Naruto returned to Konoha, he sighed a little but stopped when he heard something behind him. He sighed again and behind only to see a box painted to look like a rock. Only thing was that it was square and it had 2 holes for eyes on it. Naruto's sweat dropped and said, Konohamaru-kun, Moegi-chan, Udon-kun, rocks aren't square and they don't have eyes, you know. Suddenly the box was up in smoke and Konohamaru said with a triumphant voice, Haha, I knew making you our boss was the best idea ever, because only you could see past this great disguise. Naruto's sweat dropped at this and suddenly heard coughing from the kids and Konohamaru saying, Ack, Udon-you used to much smoke in that smoke bomb. When the smoke cleared, the kids smiled and got into their Konohamaru crops.
Booze.
Naruto laughed a little at how they were trying to act cool after what had happened in the smoke, but said, Okay, what do I owe this visit today, hug eyes? The kids giggled and Moegi asked, Naruto-ni, come play ninja with us please? Naruto was going to answer that but stopped when Sakura, who was looking like a zombie, said, What's the point of a ninja playing ninja? Sakura seemed annoyed and depressed after being told by Sasuke that she was lower than Naruto when it came to power, and that she should just stop trying to get him to like her because he didn't like weak people. Naruto was going to answer to that too, but suddenly Konohamaru glared and said, Shut it, Haruno, you're just mad because you're not as cool as Naruto-ni. Naruto gave an irritated sigh at Konohamaru as him and Sakura got into a glaring match. Moegi looked back and forth from Sakura and Konohamaru like it was a tennis match, while Udon gulped at the lighting surrounding the two. Soon enough, Konohamaru and Sakura got into a yelling match with each other, and Naruto, Udon, and Moegi sat down to watch it with wonder. Suddenly, Konohamaru yelled out, You're nothing but a flat-chested girl that's nowhere near or even close as cool or strong as Naruto-ni. That was it for Sakura. She suddenly hit the poor boy on the head with her punch, sending him to the ground. In a huff, she turned around and stomped away. Moegi and Udon ran to their friend in a flash, and Naruto hanged his head with a sigh at this, but looked up to see Sakura still walking away. He shook his head but froze when Konohamaru got back up and said as he held the bump on his head, That ugly, wide-forehead girl. Is she really a girl? He too froze when he saw Sakura stopped and start to look back at them with an evil aura as her teeth looked snarled at them. Konohamaru, Udon, Moegi, run, Naruto said as he paled. They were a little bit froze for a moment before jumping up and running down the street with Sakura chasing after at fun speed. The kids and Naruto ran down the streets and turned sharply, just trying to get away from Sakura, who charged at them at full speed. Naruto looked back for a second before hearing Konohamaru bump into someone. He turned back and stopped. Standing in front of him and the kids was a boy wearing all black and looking like a cat, and blonde-haired girl with a large fan. Naruto watched the boy glare down at Konohamaru, who was on the floor looking up to him. The boy in black spoke. That hurt you, brat. And before anyone could do anything, the boy in black picked Konohamaru up his scarf. Then the girl next to him said to the boy in black, Stop it. We're going to get scolded later. Sakura, who had stopped her chasing, had to think fast, and she said, I'm sorry. I was joking around, so. She thought in her head, Who are these people? She turned to Naruto for help but noticed the look on his face. It was a look of wonder and question. She nearly hit her head on the fence as she thought, What the heck? He's just standing there with a lost puppy look. Why isn't he helping Konohamaru? Naruto kept watching for a moment before his eyes widened. A smile went on his face and he said with almost glee, Temarine.
Kankuro ni.
I knew I recognized that messy hair and painted face. Suddenly all eyes were on the blonde boy and both Temari and Kankuro yelled out in surprise and happiness, "Naruto Tudo, is that you?" Konohamaru was now confused as much as his friends and Sakura. "Boss?" he asked out before Konohamaru stopped and looked down to the kid asking, "You know Naru?" Konohamaru nodded and said, "Yeah, he's my boss, my rival and leader." Konohamaru blinked a few times before saying, "Shit kid. You should have told me sooner. If you're a friend of Naru's, then you're okay in my book." Right when he put Konohamaru down, Temari ran over to hug the other blonde who smiled at the hug. Temari happily hugged him and said, "My God, look at how much you grew, kid. The last time I saw you were as small as those kids. And look at your cool outfit. I would have thought you would be wearing an orange jumpsuit that screamed, 'I'm right here, you know.'" Naruto chuckled at that before Kankuro walked over with a grin saying, "She's right, kid. You grew, but you're still smaller than me, you know." Sasuke, who was watching from a tree near them, jumped out and landed near Sakura, who didn't notice him. He folded his arm and put the rock he had in his hands on the ground and watched this scene. Naruto rolled his eyes a bit but smiled at Kankuro, but stopped when he looked up to a tree near them and smiled. Suddenly he said, "Garani, long time no see." Suddenly everyone looked to the tree, and true to Naruto's words, standing upside down on the tree was Gaara of the Sand himself. And Gaara is older since he was born in January and Naruto was born in October, so Naruto calls him Garani. Also, unlike Temari and Kankuro, Gaara calls Naruto Otuda-san. It means the same thing as Otudo, but I guess it's a sign of respect or something. Kankuro froze for a second and thought, "Fuck, he saw me picking a fight with that kid, didn't he?" Temari grinned to herself and thought to herself as she started to hug the daylights out of Naruto. Kankuro is so going to get his ass kicked for what he did. Ah well, at least Gaara will be in a good mood since he's going to see Naruto Tudo today. The kids thought, how on each does Naruto know these guys? While Sakura thought, what the hell is going on here? And as for Sasuke, what? I was just up there, and I didn't sense that guy at all. And yet Naruto just glanced up there and saw him. Gaara's arms were folded, and he looked at them before saying, "Kankuro, I will deal with you later." Kankuro mentally cried at what dealing Gaara was going to use. Gaara glanced at his sister and said, "Temari, let go of him. He's turning blue again." She did as she was told. Naruto smiled gratefully at his red-headed friend before suddenly being picked up and sitting on a wave of sand. Naruto blinked a few times before finding himself in front of Gaara, who said with no expression on his face, "It's been far too long since we have last spoken to each other, Naruto Otuda-san." Naruto smiled brightly at Gaara and said, "Yeah, it has. It's great to see you guys again. I haven't seen you guys since I was 8. Chapter 10, Droplet Memories. XX. Alone, that's what he was meant to have, nothing but being alone. His brother and sister now feared him, his father hated him, and his uncle tried to kill him about a year ago, and he was now dead. Gaara, age 8, sat alone on a swing in the park and stared at the children who was heading into the park. But once they had noticed him, their eyes widened and they ran out screaming. He ignored them and looked around, noticing no one was in the park but him now. His mother spoke, "Ignore those fools, my little one. It's better to be alone. They fear you because of me and they are fools." Suddenly, though his mother's voice stopped, he was now confused but heard, "He's near." And before Gaara could ask his mother, "Who's near?" Gaara noticed something or someone was walking into the park area. Gaara watched as a boy with blonde hair walked slowly into the park. He was wearing a white t-shirt and orange shorts with normal shoes. He seemed to be around his age. He also seemed a little lost by the way he was looking around and by the look on his face, but he stopped looking around when he noticed Gaara sitting by himself. Gaara thought he was going to scream and run away like the others, but suddenly, a smile appeared on the boy's face and he ran over to Gaara. Gaara thought for sure his sand was going to attack or something, but it didn't. The boy grew closer and Gaara could now see the boy had strange whisker marks on each side of his face. Soon enough the boy was standing close to Gaara and he spoke, "Hey, name's Naruto Uzumaki. Can you help me?" Gaara stared into the most stunning blue eyes he had ever seen in his life. XX. "So Garani, has that idiot Shikaku been causing you trouble again?" Naruto asked with a pout and folded his arms. Gaara let out a small chuckle and said, "No, he hasn't. Are you still mad at Mother from all those years ago, Naruto Otuda-san?" Naruto's face glowed red and a pout appeared on his lips. He then said with a glare, yes, what he did was not cool. It was embarrassing Garani. Sasuke, down below, was irked at what Naruto said and by the look on his face. Gaara chuckled again as he said, now. Mother said he was sorry, and that he wouldn't try anything again until you were older. Naruto's face grew bright red and he nearly glared at the sand Jinchuriki. Both Sasuke and Sakura never saw Naruto act this before. It was like his emotions were running around crazy, and he had no control over them. They watched as Naruto blushed and glared at the redhead who was still upside down on the tree. Before he said, Garani, I want you to tell that idiot Shikaku that I will not hesitate to harm him if he tries that again. It wasn't a threat, but a promise. Sasuke and Sakura just watched as Gaara chuckled softly and shake his head for a moment before glancing down at the Konohamaru crops. Sasuke and Sakura. He stared at them before saying in a very cold voice, You are friends of Naruto Tsuda-san, are you not? A scared nod came from them. That voice? It didn't sound right.
Garani.
Naruto spoke softly, not liking the way he said that. Gaara glanced at Temari and Kankuro, who watched him nod, and when he nodded they did too. Gaara looked at them and said, If that's true, then you'll never betray him, because if you do, then I will not hesitate to kill you all. Everyone shivered softly and Naruto shook his head knowing how protective his friend/brother was of him. Suddenly Gaara looked at Temari and Kankuro saying, Me and Naruto Tsuda-san have much catching up to do. Meet us at the hotel when you are done. Apologize to the children, Kankuro. Temari, make sure he does. Both nodded and everyone watched as both Naruto and Gaara disappeared in a whirl of sand. XX. Garani, what was that all about? Naruto asked, not liking the way his friend threatened his teammates and the others. Gaara glanced at the blonde boy before saying as he looked out onto the rooftops of Konoha, Because they must learn that if they try to hurt you, I will not show mercy to them. Naruto sighed a bit before looking to the rooftops of Konoha along with Gaara. Both sat on Gaara and his siblings' hotel rooftop. They had reached the hotel not long ago and both went to the top to watch the village from there. Gaara looked out to the sun as it was nearing sunset, but before Naruto could respond a man appeared. He had a long white piece of cloth hanging over his face and had a sand headband on. Baki stared at Gaara. He nearly froze by the look of calmness on Gaara's face and how relaxed Gaara was now. Baki, what do you want? Gaara said, not liking the fact his time with Naruto was cut in. Baki looked at Gaara before saying, I was just wondering why you and your siblings ran off too in such a hurry. You all kind of ran off when we got into the village gates. His uncovered, I landed on Naruto, who was happily sitting next to Gaara. Gaara noticed Baki was staring at Naruto, and Gaara spoke up, Baki, this is Naruto Uzumaki, an old friend of mine when I was a child. Me and my siblings are closely connected to him, and when we heard the exams were being held in his home village, we were excited to see him again. Gaara looked at Naruto and said as he pointed to Baki, Naruto, this is my Jounin sensei Baki. Naruto smiled sweetly at Baki and said, It's nice to meet you, Baki. Baki nodded in response, not sure if what he was seeing was real. Was this boy really a friend of Gaara's? He watched as Gaara looked at him before going back into a conversation with the blonde. He nearly had a heart attack as he watched the blonde smile sweetly at Gaara and Gaara smiling softly at the blonde. Suddenly, though, two more figures appeared. Temari saw Naruto and hugged to attack him again, saying, Hi Naruto Tudo. Sorry it took us a while, those teammates of yours kept questioning us. Does that pink-haired girl live under a rock or something? She didn't know that the exams are being held in Konoha. Kankuro smiled and walked over patting Naruto's head saying, Yeah, and that black-haired brat kept asking me why did Gaara take you away from them. I didn't answer him because he's a stuck-up brat. Both of Gaara's older siblings stopped and asked out, Are they really your teammates, Naru? They act like idiots. Naruto's answer was an uneasy chuckle. Baki only watched as Temari and Kankuro began to talk to Naruto, making the blonde pout and smile. But the thing that nearly made him have a heart attack was when Naruto hugged attacked Gaara and Gaara actually smiled softly at him. Who the hell is this kid? Baki thought as he watched Naruto laugh and Gaara just smile softly. XX. Naruto waved goodbye to Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro as he walked out of their hospital room. It was nearing dark now and Naruto needed to go home and make dinner for himself. As Naruto walked quietly home, he closed his eyes and thought about how things were going different now for him. mostly around Konoha and his team. Even though he was getting treated a little better than before, he couldn't help but feel like something bad, something life-changing, was going to happen sooner or later. What that something was, he didn't know, but he knew it was coming soon. XX. Naruto got home just after the sun had set around him. He walked to his door and opened it. He gave a little sigh before walking into his apartment and unslipping his feet from his shoes. He needed to rest. He softly kicked the shoes off before walking around his apartment front room. He had just returned from Gaara's hotel and he had just seen Haku and Zabuza. Naruto had stopped by to say hello to the two who kindly let him into their apartment room. He went to the kitchen and made some dinner. It was ramen, he was too lazy to make anything else. Naruto sighed a bit before something caught his eyes. His answering machine message light was blinking, which meant he had a message. That's weird, Naruto thought as he stood up from the chair he sat in and walked calmly over to it. He looked at the flashing button before pressing it. A loud beep was heard and the automatic voice spoke out in the room. You have 5 new messages. Message 1. Naruto, pick up. It's me, Temari. Come on. I just want you to know me and my brothers are in Konoha for the exams, and we really want to see you. I'm using a payphone right now. Man, I bet you're training right now, aren't you? Naru, pick up. Fine. Well, anyway, bye Naru. See you soon. Time. 9:30 a.m. Naruto blinked a few times before coming up with the collusion that she sent this message when he was with his teammates and was away from the house, and since he didn't come home until now, he didn't hear it until now. He shook his head at how Temari was so excited to see him again. Message 2. Naruto, it's me, the old man, we need to talk tomorrow. I have gotten a message from Gaara, you know that boy you grew close with when I took you to Suna with me. We need to discuss something very important tomorrow morning and I need your help. Time. 10:45 a.m. Naruto blinked again, it sounded important but the Hokage did say tomorrow so it shall be. Message 3. Boss, pick up. Where are you? Are you okay? Why did that scary redhead take you away, boss? Time. 5:40 p.m. Naruto cringed and was sure most of the apartment was awakened by that yelling from Konohamaru, Udon, and Moegi. Ow, that hurt. Message 4. Naruto, pick up. Answer your phone, you dope. I want answers and I want them now. Just who was those sand ninjas and how the hell do they know you? Time. 5:45 p.m. Naruto blinked confused. Why the hell did Sasuke just call him? He never gave the Uchiha his number, so how the hell did he reach his house? Before Naruto could continue his thoughts, the message went on to the last message. Message 5. Naruto, what the hell was that all about? You better call me back and tell me. Who were those jerks they called US little kids? Answer me. Time. 6 p.m. End of final messages. Naruto cringed more than when Konohamaru, Udon, and Moegi yelled out. He could hear people from the room above hitting the ground and yelling out, "Stop making that racket." Naruto whispered a sorry. To the people inside, he couldn't help but think, Sakura, your voice can be very loud at times. Naruto shook his head at the messages before heading to his room. It was time for sleep, but still things were bothering him. Something just didn't seem right. XX.
Gaara ni.
You're the Kazekage's son? 8-year-old Naruto yelled out as he stood next to the old man of Konoha. Gaara looked up surprised to see Naruto standing next to the Hokage of Konoha. It was only a days ago when he had first met the blonde, and Gaara had the best days of his life. During those days he had met the blonde who was lost and looking for the tower. For the first time ever his sand did not attack the blonde at all, causing Gaara to freak out a bit, but after a while the blonde forgot he was lost and had asked Gaara to play with him, causing once again Gaara to freak, but soon enough his mother told him to play with the blonde, which nearly gave poor Gaara a heart attack. But due to the fact that Gaara always obeyed his mother, he had done so, and playing with the blonde was like playing with a long-lost friend. Something in Gaara's once cold heart was something warm, something he never felt before. But while playing in the park, swinging on the swings, a group of kids came in and watched in horror as someone was playing with the demon of their village. In panic, the kids ran over and pulled Naruto, who was pushing Gaara on the swings, away from him. Naruto yelped in pain from their tugging and yelled at them to let go. That was until one kid yelled at him saying, "You have to stay away from him, he's a demon. He'll kill you." Naruto had stopped and stared wide-eyed at Gaara, who stiffened. His sand began to swirl, and he was ready for Naruto to run away and scream. But that's when Naruto did something that shocked him and the other children. Naruto turned back to the kid and punched him in the face, causing the other kids to stop and stare wide-eyed. Naruto was looking down and holding his fist, yelling in anger. Gaara is not a demon, so don't you ever call him that again, understand? He's as human as you and me. The kids didn't say anything as Naruto went over and dragged Gaara away from the playground. The entire time Naruto was looking down and pulling Gaara around. Gaara was just staring at Naruto, not sure what to do now. His mother wasn't talking to him, and there was a strange feeling in his chest, a feeling he had never felt before. Soon enough, both young 8-year-olds stopped and was now standing in an empty area. Nothing was there, only sand and the winds. He watched as the blonde looked up to the sky and sigh, calming himself down until he heard the blonde ask out, "You have a demon sealed away, don't you, Gaara?" Gaara once again stiffened and was ready to attack the blonde if he had to. He watched the blonde turn to look at him, and Gaara's eyes widened at what he saw. The blonde eyes were swirling around in them, like a whirlpool would. He watched at the blonde smile softly and say, "Funny, so do I." After that, Naruto told Gaara he had the Kyubi no Kitsune locked away within him and could talk to the fox from time to time. He also told Gaara that he understood how it felt to be treated like the way he was treated, and that he knew about Gaara's demon since he had entered the village. Kyubi told him that someone had a demon locked away in them, and being his curious self he went to go find the container. Gaara didn't know what to do when he heard those and found out that there was someone like him. Someone understood his pain, and someone knew what it felt like to carry the burden of being a host to a demon. After that, both demon containers sat down and spoke among each other quietly, and when the day was gone, Naruto asked if Gaara would like to meet here again. Causing Gaara to nod almost instantly, he felt calm, he felt safe, he felt different when he was with the blonde. When he had nodded, Naruto smiled brightly and said, "All right, see you tomorrow afternoon, Gaara-ni." When Naruto said those words, Gaara's eyes widened more as the blonde hugged him and waved goodbye before walking off. He was stunned that Naruto had called him Gaara-ni. A few days went by, and each time the two containers spoke among each other, each time growing closer like family. A family Gaara would like to have, a family Naruto always needed. Then by the 4th day, Gaara had started to call Naruto Tuda-san. They had even got to see the other one's demons because they were told about a mind link between demon containers. When Gaara met Kyubi no Kitsune, he was imitated by the great Nine-Tails. The strongest demon of the tailed beasts was right in front of him. Naruto even joked and angered the beast by calling him Furball, which caused Gaara to stare at his new friend and little brother like he was insane, and that was a lot coming from Gaara. Then after meeting Kyubi, Gaara took Naruto to meet his demon, Shikaku, which wasn't the greatest thing ever. Shikaku was a bit perverted to the young Uzumaki, causing Naruto to nearly die from blushing so much. Before they left, Shikaku smirked and yelled out, "I can't wait to see what you look like when you're older, kid. I'd have to remember to have some time alone with you." Causing Naruto to yell out in embarrassment and causing Gaara to want to kick his demon's ass for saying stuff like that. The only reason why Shikaku didn't do much to the poor Uzumaki was because Naruto was still a kid, and that the fact Kyubi kept sending his "I am gonna kill you if you touch my kid again" glare. Anyway, after those few days, Naruto and Gaara gained a bond that didn't go unnoticed by the people in the villagers of Suna. But just not too long ago, Naruto told Gaara the bad news. He was leaving in the next morning with his Jiji, so he could return back to his village, Konoha. At first, when Gaara heard this, he wanted to beg Naruto to stay, but understood that Naruto needed to go home. And for their last day together, Naruto and Gaara spent it together, almost never leaving each other's sight. When the day ended, Naruto said goodbye and had left Gaara in the park by himself. Gaara had sighed and went back home, only to find his brother and sister waiting. He was a bit confused because Gaara had been living alone ever since he had killed his uncle, and his siblings feared him since then. Then Temari told him they were going to a dinner party to meet the Hokage for the first time. All of them were to attend, even Gaara. Gaara was surprised that his father was allowing him to come to a dinner party, and was then given clothing by a fearing Kankuro. Gaara only blinked a bit more confused, but did as he was told, which scared his sibling much more because they had never seen Gaara act so calm before. The only reason he was calm was because he had made a true friend who understood him. So here he was at the dinner party meeting the Hokage for the first time, only to be shocked to see his best and first friend standing and talking to the Hokage. He was so surprised that he nearly ran over and asked him, "Naruto Tuda-san, what are you doing here?" Causing everyone there who knew about Gaara's demon to freeze and stare disbelieving at Gaara. Naruto had stopped talking to the old man and turned to Gaara, surprised to see him there too. That was until Naruto had pieced that Gaara was one of the Kazekage sons he was told about from the old man. He smiled and said, "Gaara, you're the Kazekage's son." Then Gaara did something that shocked almost all of the people in room. Gaara went over and hugged attacked the blonde, causing Naruto to blink confused by what Gaara did. While most of the people in the room yelled and freaked out, the Kazekage looked at the Hokage with a pale look asking, how come is Gaara hugging that young lad?" The only thing the Hokage did was smile softly and say, "Oh, Naruto has a way of making friends." XX. Naruto woke up from his dream and stared at the ceiling above him. He blinked before smiling softly at the old memory of him and Gaara becoming friends, and how both of them freaked out more than half of Suna village back then. He chuckled a bit to himself and slowly rose from his bed. He couldn't help but think to himself, if I didn't become friends with Gaara, who knows how he would have become. Naruto stopped when he started to hear a strange sound in the room. Naruto blinked a few times before looking over to his bathroom door that was wide open. Dripping off the faucet sink was small drops of water, dripping once, twice, 3 times. Naruto blinked a bit before getting up from his bed and walking over. He went into the bathroom and turned the handle to off on the water. He watched as the water stopped before one last droplet hit the bottom of the sink. He smiled softly at this for some reason. But still something didn't seem right to him. It felt like something horrible was going to happen soon. Not now but soon,